The moment I pushed open the door to my apartment after an exhausting day at the corporate office, a whirlwind of sensations hit me dead on. The heavy, greasy scent of a cheap pot roast, the sharp sting of Vicks VapoRub, the damp mustiness of laundry drying indoors, and a loud clamor of laughter and overlapping conversations. My living room floor was littered with peanut shells and pistachio husks. Out on the balcony, cloth baby diapers were hung up to dry, and my mother-in-law, Miriam, was pointing toward the master bedroom, declaring with an authoritative bark, "From now on, your brother-in-law and his wife are going to live here for at least a year." I only asked one question. "Who gave you permission to rearrange my home however you please?" My husband, Declan, walked right up to me and, in front of his entire family, slapped me hard across the face before shouting, "Watch your mouth. Look at me." On the day of my wedding to Declan, my mother gripped my hands tightly outside the suburban country club where we were holding the reception. She didn't bawl her eyes out or try to talk me out of it like other mothers might. She just looked at me with swollen eyes and whispered, "Sloane, my sweet girl, there's nothing wrong with marrying a man from a humble background or living a little far from the city. The most terrifying thing is when the man standing next to you doesn't know how to love you." Back then, I was young. I still believed that love lived in promises whispered under dim lights. I thought my mother was just being an overprotective parent. I thought that Declan, despite coming from a working-class family, having a mediocre job, and an overbearing mother, was a good, understanding man. I thought that as long as a married couple truly loved each other, everything else could be overcome. Now, every time I remember my mother's words, it all makes sense. Parents don't worry for nothing. They have lived half a lifetime. They have seen enough fake smiles, empty promises, and families that look harmonious on the outside but are rotting from the inside out. It was only me, blinded by love, who willingly tied myself to a marriage I thought would be my safe harbor, only to realize it was the coldest gilded cage I could have ever built. My name is Sloane Kensington. Before getting married, I was the chief financial officer for a major pharmaceutical company in downtown Chicago. My job was high stress, but my salary was exceptional. I had been fiercely independent since I was young, accustomed to the reality that every decision had to be clear, every document transparent, and every dollar accounted for. Perhaps that was why my parents trusted me so implicitly. Before the wedding, they bought me a luxury condo in River North, right in the heart of Chicago, with the deed entirely in my name. As part of my dowry, my mother told me, "This house is your way back, honey. If your husband turns out to be a good man, consider it your palace. If you chose the wrong husband, consider it your sanctuary." At the time, I laughed, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "Don't say things like that, Mom. I trust Declan. I know he'll never make me need a way back." The condo was expansive. 3 bedrooms, a massive living room overlooking the city skyline, and a balcony bathed in morning sunlight. Every sheer curtain, every high thread count sheet, every ceramic mug in the kitchen, I picked them out myself. I dreamed of a little family in that space. In the mornings, we would eat avocado toast together. At night, I would cook, and he would load the dishwasher. On weekends, we'd have our parents over for brunch. But the dreams of a woman in love often shatter when they collide with reality, like a crystal wine glass dropped on marble flooring. Right after we got married, Miriam, my mother-in-law, started showing her true colors. The very first day she visited the condo, she roamed from the living room to the bedrooms. Her hands ran over the quartz countertops, her eyes scanned the walk-in closets, and she clicked her tongue. Such a beautiful place. It's so strange that only the daughter-in-law's name is on the paperwork. A marriage is a union of 2 people. Declan's name should be on the deed, so it's fair. I heard her, but I responded with polite grace. "Well, Miriam, this condo was a pre-wedding gift from my parents. The paperwork was finalized in a trust a long time ago. We live here together, so a piece of paper won't affect our family harmony." Miriam smiled cynically. She didn't say anything else, but the way she looked at me changed from that day on. It was no longer the look of a mother to a daughter-in-law, but the look of someone standing outside a fence, staring at fertile land for which she didn't yet possess the keys. At that moment, Declan pulled me into the kitchen and whispered, "Please, just be patient with my mom. She's from a small rural town and has old-school values. She doesn't mean any harm. You're smarter. You went to an Ivy League school. Just give a little. And I gave. I compromised on the smallest things. Miriam criticized my cooking for being bland. I smiled and added more salt. She complained that I got home from the corporate office too late, that I didn't know how to take care of my husband. I started waking up at 5:00 a.m. to prep his breakfast. She claimed that a daughter-in-law with a high six-figure salary who didn't financially support her husband's family was an ungrateful snob. So, every month, I wired an allowance to her bank account, even though she lived hours away in Indiana. Then came the issue with Holden, Declan's younger brother. Holden was several years younger, married, but chronically unemployed. He called himself an entrepreneur to sound impressive, but the reality was that one day he was flipping vintage sneakers. The next he was trying to open a craft brewery with zero capital, and the next he was investing in crypto schemes. Every business lasted a few months before tanking. And every time he failed, the first person he called wasn't his brother. It was me. Sloan, I'm completely tapped out. Can you spot me a little cash? I'll pay you back the second I get liquid. At first, it was just a few $100s. Then it became thousands, eventually hitting 10 grand. I was reluctant to transfer the funds, but Declan would always sigh and rub his temples. He's my only brother, Sloan. He's going through a rough patch. If we don't help him out, who will? His mother would call me in tears, saying that a stingy sister-in-law brought bad karma to the family. I wired the money. Holden took it, thanked me sweetly, and never once mentioned paying it back. Whenever I hinted at it to Declan, he would scowl. You don't lack for anything. Why are you harassing Holden over a few bucks? He's struggling. If you ask for the money, you'll humiliate him. I looked at my husband, wanting to scream 1,000 times. And what about me? The money I earned didn't just magically appear in my checking account. I left the house before dawn, came back after dark, worked overtime until my stomach tied itself into knots, and signed financial audits until my shoulders went numb. But in their eyes, my money was just a communal pot sitting there, waiting for his family to dip their hands into whenever they pleased. Yet, in the end, I always kept my mouth shut. I dreaded the arguments. I was terrified of disappointing my parents, of having people whisper that the newlywed was already acting like a greedy tyrant. I consoled myself by thinking, well, money can always be earned back. Keeping the family united is what matters. A woman's greatest suffering isn't when others deceive her. It's when she actively looks for excuses to justify the injustice she's enduring. Time passed, and my accommodating attitude didn't make my husband's family grateful. It only convinced them that I was a doormat. Miriam started visiting the Chicago condo more frequently. At first, she said it was for a weekend. Then it turned into a full week. She opened my stainless steel fridge whenever she pleased, rummaged through my walk-in closet, rearranged the expensive planters on my balcony, and moved the antique console table my parents had gifted me. One day, I came home to find her holding a designer handbag I had just bought, handing it over to Briar, Holden's pregnant wife, so she could admire it in the mirror. I froze in the bedroom doorway. That bag was a reward to myself after a grueling fiscal quarter. I hadn't even taken the tags off. Seeing me there, Briar looked a little embarrassed, but Miriam didn't miss a beat. Briar loves it. Come on. Let her have it. You can afford another one. Are you really going to be petty over a purse? Women need to support each other and help the family. I took a breath. Miriam, I just bought that bag. I haven't even used it yet. Miriam's face hardened instantly. Exactly. Because you haven't used it, it's better. Let your sister-in-law break it in. You are so stingy with your own family. Or do you just look down on your husband's relatives and think we aren't worthy of your fancy things? Declan, who was in the living room scrolling through his phone, heard the commotion and walked in. I thought he would defend me. Instead, he glanced at the bag and sighed. Come on, babe, it's just a purse. You make insane money. If you like it, just order another one online. Don't piss my mom off over a piece of leather. Such a simple sentence, but it felt like a concrete slab crushing my chest. I handed the bag to Briar. She took it, chirping her thanks, her eyes unable to mask her victorious gleam. Meanwhile, I walked into the master bathroom, locked the door, and stood in front of the vanity mirror for a very long time. I asked myself why I felt like an unwanted guest in my own home. But then I washed my face, changed my clothes, and went out to prep dinner. I still foolishly believed that if I was kind, the storm would pass. But for greedy people, someone else's kindness isn't a gift. It's an unlocked door. Once they push it open a crack, they kick it down and claim the whole house. Everything completely shattered that night. I had just finished a brutal afternoon-long corporate meeting. The firm was prepping for an SEC compliance audit. I had to review every expenditure, every spreadsheet, every digital signature. My head was pounding, and my stomach acid was burning because I had only managed to choke down a black coffee since noon. On the Uber ride home, all I could think about was taking a scalding hot shower, eating a bland bowl of mashed potatoes, and crashing on my sofa. Just 30 minutes of peace. But when the elevator doors chimed open on my floor, I could already hear the raucous laughter echoing from my door. I stopped in the hallway, staring at a pair of muddy, unfamiliar sneakers kicked off haphazardly on my welcome mat. Next to them were several diaper bags, bulk boxes of baby formula, a massive suitcase, and a cheap red plastic basin that was still dripping wet. My stomach plummeted. I unlocked the door, and a wall of intense odors assaulted me. The smell of greasy meat, the stench of rubbing alcohol, sunflower seeds, and damp clothes drying on the radiators. My usually immaculate living room was littered with peanut shells. My cream-colored Persian rug, which I maintained meticulously, had several dark grease stains on it. Carelessly placed mugs left wet rings on my glass coffee table. A puddle of spilled iced tea had dried into a sticky mess. My favorite beige leather sectional was occupied by someone sprawling out entirely, and crumpled tissues were scattered across the hardwood floor. Briar, my sister-in-law, was lounging on the sofa. One hand rested on her heavily pregnant belly. The other was scrolling through TikTok. She had her bare feet propped up on a throw pillow I had literally dry cleaned the week before. Seeing me walk in, she barely glanced up. "Oh, you're back, Sloane. Man, you work late." "I was starving, so your mother-in-law made a huge pot roast." From the kitchen came the clattering of my expensive all-clad pots. Holden had opened my climate-controlled wine fridge, pulled out a bottle, examined the label, and yelled to Miriam, "This one looks expensive." "Mom, I'm popping this open tonight to celebrate the baby coming." And Miriam was in the guest bedroom with a tape measure in her hand, barking orders as if her name was on the deed. "This bed is way too small. We need to toss it and buy a California king. The closet is tiny, too. Baby gear takes up a lot of space. And these curtains are terrible for a postpartum mother. Tomorrow, call a handyman to install blackout shades. And that home office clear out all of Sloane's paperwork and turn it into a changing room." I stood paralyzed in the center of the living room. My house, my office, my belongings. In the span of a single workday, it had all been gutted and reorganized to their liking, as if I had ceased to exist. I set my briefcase down, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Miriam, why did everyone come without giving me a heads up?" Miriam turned around and looked at me without a shred of guilt. "On the contrary," she scowled, as if my question was highly offensive. "A heads up? This is your house, which means it's also Declan's house. And I am his mother. I can visit whenever I damn well please." I took a deep breath. "Yes, Miriam. If you're visiting, I have no problem with that. But why did you bring all of Holden and Briar's things here? And my office, who gave you permission to open my filing cabinets?" Miriam threw the tape measure onto the bed and marched into the living room, raising her voice. "Who gave me permission?" "I gave myself permission. Briar is about to give birth. Their rental apartment is a dump. With all the rain we've had, it's full of mold. How is a newborn supposed to be healthy in there? This condo is huge, and the two of you don't even use the space. Starting today, Holden and his wife are moving in here for her postpartum recovery. The plan is a year, and when my grandson gets bigger, we'll figure out the rest." I heard every single word with crystal clarity. A year. Without asking me, without consulting me, once. As if this multi-million-dollar property was the Vance family's personal rec center, and I was just the janitor. I turned to Holden. He was still clutching my expensive Cabernet. "Besides, Sloane," he smirked, "this is your nephew, not a stranger. When he grows up, he'll call you Auntie. If you're this stingy, you'll curse yourself." Briar sat up, resting a hand dramatically on her belly. Her voice was soft, but the words were coated in poison. Honestly, I feel bad imposing. Sloan. But my OBGYN said I have a high-risk pregnancy. After delivery, I need a sterile, well-ventilated space. Our place is tiny. Your mother-in-law is terrified the mold will hurt her precious grandson. Plus, you're at the office all day anyway. Having such a big house sit empty is just a waste. I looked at Briar's swollen belly. I saw the triumphant smugness hiding behind her fake frailty, and then I looked back at Miriam. Miriam, if Briar needs a good place to recover, I can book her a luxury postpartum suite at a private maternity clinic in the suburbs. They have nurses, doctors, and catered nutritional meals. I will pay for the whole thing. 2 months, 3 months. It doesn't matter. It would be much more comfortable for Briar, and you wouldn't have to stress yourself. I said it calmly and politely. I thought it was the most generous, logical solution. But Miriam's face contorted into something demonic. She pointed a finger right between my eyes. Her voice shook with rage, or rather, because her entitlement had been challenged. Oh, so that's what this is. You're terrified your pristine house is going to get dirty if your husband's family lives in it. You've got a fat bank account, so you think you can just throw cash in my face and buy off your sister-in-law to kick us to the curb, right? A private clinic. Sounds real nice. You want all our relatives to know that the rich daughter-in-law looks down on her husband's poor, exhausted family? I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. That's not it, Miriam. I am solely thinking about Briar's health and the baby. Miriam let out a harsh, sarcastic bark of a laugh. You care about her health, but you won't let her live in a spacious house. You care about the baby, but you're hoarding a spare bedroom. Let me tell you something, Sloan. When a woman gets married, her life belongs to her husband's family. Just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean you get to act like the queen of the castle. Holden slammed the wine bottle down on the quartz counter with a loud thud. That's a really ugly way to talk, Sloan. Declan is your husband, the oldest son of this family. Your house is his house. We came here to stay, not to rob the place. Why are you acting so unhinged? I looked Holden dead in the eyes. This condo is deeded exclusively in my name. My parents bought it for me before I got married. It's not that I refuse to help, but absolutely no one has the right to move into my home without my explicit consent. The moment the sentence left my lips, the air in the living room turned to ice. Miriam glared at me with sheer hatred. Briar clutched her stomach, her eyes brimming with sudden, theatrical tears. Saying that is basically kicking me out, isn't it? Briar sobbed. I know, we're broke. I don't have a fancy house, so you treat me like trash. Let's go, Holden. I'd rather give birth in a moldy apartment than be called a squatter here. She was weeping loudly, but from the corner of her eye, she kept glancing at the front door. She knew exactly who she was waiting for. And right on cue, the sound of a key turning in the deadbolt echoed through the foyer. Declan was home. He walked in, his dress shirt wrinkled, carrying his briefcase. His face was flushed, carrying the faint smell of happy hour draft beer. Seeing his mother standing in the middle of the living room, red-faced with rage, his sister-in-law clutching her stomach and sobbing, and me, standing completely still with an exhausted, frozen expression, he immediately scowled. What the hell is going on now? Miriam, acting as if the cavalry had arrived, slapped her own thigh and broke into loud, dramatic wails. Declan, my son, come look at your wife. I brought Briar here so she could have a safe place after the delivery. Not only does Sloan not give a damn about her own sister-in-law, she's claiming this is her private property, that no one can step foot inside without her permission. She said me and your brother have zero rights here. Holden immediately piled on. You see this, Declan? Did you hear her? We might be broke, but we have dignity. If she doesn't want to help, she should just say it. She doesn't need to shove the title deed in our faces to intimidate us. Briar cried even louder. Declan, just leave it. Don't yell at Sloan. It's my fault for having such terrible luck. My baby isn't even born yet, and he's already a burden to his aunt. I stood there, watching them flawlessly execute their victim routine in front of my husband. I foolishly thought that after 5 years together, Declan would at least ask me for my side of the story. Sloan, what actually happened? Are you okay? Why is my family tearing apart our condo? He didn't ask a single thing. He dropped his briefcase onto the floor, turned to me, and his eyes burned with misplaced fury. What kind of insane drama are you starting now? My mom and brother just want to stay for a little while. Is it really necessary to act like a psychopath? I stared at him, a hard knot forming in my throat. Do you realize I just walked through the door from a 12-hour shift? Do you realize they gutted my office and packed my legal documents into cardboard boxes? Do you realize your mother arbitrarily decided Holden and his wife are moving in here for a year, without asking me a single word? Declan furrowed his brow. So what? It's a lot of drama over nothing. The condo is huge. 2 extra people aren't going to kill you. You're always like this. All you care about is your spreadsheets, your paperwork, your money. Family is the most important thing. I let out a very soft, hollow laugh. Family. Do you actually consider me family? Or am I just family when you need an ATM, a free hotel, or a punching bag? Declan's face darkened. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I stared him down, pronouncing every syllable with lethal precision. It means this condo is my soul, separate property under Illinois law. I have the ultimate authority to dictate who lives here and who doesn't. I am not refusing to help Briar, but I absolutely will not allow your entire bloodline to hijack my bedrooms, trash my belongings, and dictate my life as if I were a ghost. Smack. The sound was sharp, dry, and silenced the entire room. My left cheek exploded in fire. The force of it threw me off balance, my shoulder slamming into the edge of the drywall, and the metallic taste of copper flooded the corner of my mouth. My vision whited out for a split second. When I blinked the room back into focus, Declan was standing in front of me, his hand still hovering in the air. His eyes were bloodshot, fueled by anger, by a fragile male ego, and by the fact that my words had struck his deepest insecurity. He snarled, "Watch your mouth! How dare you speak to my mother like that? You think just because you have a fancy title, money, and a deed, you can treat people like dirt? I am your husband, and this is my house too." The living room fell into a graveyard silence. Miriam stopped her fake crying. Holden dropped his smug grin. Briar even forgot to cradle her stomach. They all stared at me, waiting for me to shatter, waiting for me to break down in hysterics, to beg for forgiveness, just like I had always done. I slowly brought my hand up to the corner of my mouth. I pulled it back, and my fingertip was stained crimson. Oddly enough, in that exact moment, the pain vanished. Declan's slap hadn't just landed on my flesh. It had shattered all the years I spent gaslighting myself. That strike woke up the naive woman who thought enduring disrespect was the secret to a lasting marriage. It violently ripped off the final veil covering the true face of the man I once called my safe harbor. I looked at Declan. Then at Miriam, Holden, and Briar. Under the recessed LED lighting, every face was brutally clear to me now. Greed, smugness, fake piety, cowardice. Suddenly, I realized a profound truth. Marriages don't die because love runs out. They die the exact second a woman realizes she has poured her soul into a family, entirely devoid of a heart. I wiped the smear of blood from my lip and offered a faint, terrifyingly calm smile. All right. You're right. I've been too caught up climbing the corporate ladder. Maybe I forgot how a proper wife should behave. As for Holden and Briar staying here for the baby, I'll make the arrangements. Miriam looked completely dumbfounded. She probably didn't expect me to surrender so easily. But a split second later, a wave of arrogant triumph washed over her features. See? If you had just been reasonable from the start, there would be peace in this house. Tomorrow, clear out the master bedroom for Briar and empty your office. You can stick your work papers in a closet somewhere. Holden grinned from ear to ear. That's what I like to hear, Sloane. I knew you were a generous woman. Briar wiped away her non-existent tears, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Thank you, Sloane. If we step on your toes while we live together, just forgive us, okay? Declan looked down at me. His voice was still harsh, but laced with sick satisfaction. Glad you finally understand. I only hit you because I needed you to learn how to respect my mother and my family. Don't make me do it again. I lowered my head, hiding the absolute glacial void in my eyes. Yes, Declan, I understand. Not a single person in that room realized that my submission wasn't an admission of guilt. It was an execution order. I excused myself to the master bathroom, claiming I was exhausted. Before I left the room, Miriam made sure to add, "Remember, call a maid service first thing tomorrow. Briar is heavy into her third trimester. She can't be waiting around in filth." I didn't turn back. Every step I took down the hallway felt impossibly light. Deep inside my chest, a heavy iron vault door had just slammed shut, locking them out forever. I walked into the master bedroom, deadbolted the door, and stood in front of the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me had a swollen, violently red left cheek, a split lip, and eyes that were damp but refusing to drop a single tear. I stared at her for a long time. I looked at her hair, which still smelled like downtown smog, her silk blouse, wrinkled from a ruthless 12-hour shift, her shoulders, which had carried burdens that never belonged to her in the first place. I whispered to the glass, "Sloane, that's enough. We're done." Out in the living room, my in-laws were already laughing again, loudly debating where to put the bassinet, which premium stroller brand I should buy them, and which cabinets to clear out for the breast pump. They thought I had broken. They believed a physical strike was the proper tool to domesticate me. They assumed that if they applied enough pressure, I would hand over my luxury condo, my bank accounts, and my life on a silver platter. What they didn't know is that when a woman's hope completely flatlines, she becomes horrifyingly calm. That night, as the apartment drowned in the sounds of their victorious celebrating, I walked over to my hidden wall safe. I pulled out a thick accordion folder containing the title deed to the condo, my prenuptial property declarations, bank statements, and an encrypted hard drive linked to the Nest security camera hidden in the living room bookshelf. I laid everything out on my mahogany desk. Every single sheet of paper rested perfectly under the glow of the desk lamp. Every piece of evidence, every routing number, every legal signature suddenly transformed into a weapon far sharper than any insult. I had absolutely no intention of arguing with them anymore. I wasn't going to fight over every square foot of real estate, every armchair, every plate of food. They wanted to stay in my condo? Fine. I would give them one final night to dream that this multi-million-dollar asset belonged to them. By tomorrow morning, that dream would violently mutate into a nightmare they would never, ever forget. I hadn't immediately locked the bedroom door. I stood quietly behind it for a moment, listening to the noise leaking through the crack. Miriam's booming, arrogant laughter. The pop of the cork as Holden opened another bottle of my wine. Briar's whiny voice demanding more pot roast. And Declan's voice telling his mother that sometimes, women just need to be put in their place so they remember who the man of the house is. Every syllable slithered through the doorframe and pierced my eardrums like hypodermic needles. It was strange. If this had happened a year ago, I would have collapsed onto the hardwood floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Sobbing from the physical pain, the sheer humiliation, and the heartbreak that the man I loved had struck me without a second thought to impress his mommy. But tonight, I didn't shed a tear. Not because I was too strong to feel the agony, but because the pain had breached its absolute limit and crystallized into cold, lethal lucidity. I walked over to my vanity, opened a drawer, and grabbed a cotton pad. The mirror reflected the swelling, the broken skin. I dabbed the cut with rubbing alcohol. The sharp sting made my fingers flinch for a microsecond, but only a microsecond. Outside my door, they were dreaming of a free penthouse lifestyle. They thought I had lowered my head out of fear. They were dead wrong. A woman can love fiercely. She can be patient to the point of looking pathetic. But the millisecond that love is murdered, shedding even one more tear is an offensive waste of time. I returned to the desk. Inside the safe, there weren't piles of diamond jewelry like Miriam loved to fantasize about. It held organized legal files, my stock portfolios, the deed to the property, life insurance policies, my U.S. passport, medical records, and the security footage drive. I booted up my MacBook and plugged in the drive. The Ultra HD footage from the living room a few hours prior popped up instantly. Miriam ordering my furniture to be dragged around, Holden raiding the liquor cabinet, Briar lounging. Then, the footage of Declan storming in, screaming at me. And finally, the swing of his arm. Smack. Even through the laptop speakers, the sound made my jaw throb. I paused the video on the exact frame where Declan's palm connected with my face. I exported the clip into a secure cloud folder titled DV, Evidence, Vance. My hands were steady. I picked up my iPhone and dialed Arthur Sterling. Arthur was my father's old fraternity brother and the family's trusted attorney. He was a shark when it came to high net worth divorces, asset protection, and civil litigation. Over the years, my dad would casually drop hints. If you ever hit a wall with that boy, call Uncle Arthur. Don't you ever let anyone walk all over you out of embarrassment, Sloane? Whenever my dad said that, I brushed it off. I thought he was just being an elitist skeptic. Tonight, I realized my father wasn't a skeptic. He just loved his daughter enough to see the wolves circling her. The phone rang 3 times before it connected. Arthur's voice was groggy. Sloane? What's going on, kiddo? It's past midnight. I stared at the paused frame of my husband assaulting me. Uncle Arthur, I need to file a contested divorce, and I need it fast-tracked. I need you to draft the petitions first thing tomorrow morning. There was dead silence on the line. When Arthur spoke again, the sleep was entirely gone from his voice. It was replaced by a razor-sharp edge. Did he put his hands on you? I didn't answer right away. The silence was the only confirmation he needed. Arthur exhaled sharply, instantly shifting into his ruthless attorney persona. Listen to me closely, Sloane. Tonight, your physical safety is priority 0. Document the injuries with time-stamped photos. Back up the camera footage to multiple cloud servers. Screenshot every text message. Gather the deed, the trust documents, and your bank statements. Put them somewhere he cannot access. Tomorrow morning, you come straight to my firm in the Loop. I'll have the divorce petition, an emergency order to freeze joint accounts, a declaration of separate property, and a restraining order waiting for your signature. I have everything ready, I replied quietly. Arthur paused, clearly surprised by my lack of hysteria. Good girl. The condo is still held in the premarital trust solely under your name, correct? Yes, Uncle Arthur. Deed is in my name alone. My parents bought it outright before the wedding. Not a single dime of Declan's money went into it. Then he has 0 legal claim to the property in the state of Illinois, Arthur stated. But tread lightly tonight. Desperate, greedy people do dangerous things when they realize the gravy train is derailing. Come to the office at 8 a.m. Do not say a word to any of them. I won't. After I hung up, I opened my phone's camera and took multiple photos of my face from every angle under the harsh bathroom light. Every time the shutter clicked, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Was this the same Sloane who used to painstakingly meal prep for her husband? The one who stayed up until 1 a.m. reheating his dinner because he was stuck at the office? I looked at the final photo and made a blood pact with myself. After tonight, never again. I opened my corporate email. Sitting in a flagged folder was a job offer I had been sitting on for 2 weeks. It was an executive transfer from our U.S. headquarters to the London regional office as the VP of Finance. It was a 3-year expat contract with a massive compensation package, corporate housing in Mayfair, private healthcare, first-class flights, and full visa sponsorship. When I first received the offer, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid of moving to the UK, but because I was factoring Declan into the equation. I worried about how a 3-year long-distance stint would affect our marriage. I worried my husband would feel emasculated. I worried my mother-in-law would smear me as a workaholic who abandoned her wifely duties. I spent so much time agonizing over their feelings that I forgot I was the main character of my own life. I opened the PDF. The crisp corporate letterhead glowing on the screen felt like an oxygen mask compared to the suffocating toxicity outside my bedroom door. I dialed Meredith Hayes, the global HR director. Given the time difference with her current business trip in Tokyo, I knew she'd be awake. She picked up on the second ring. Sloane, calling me at this hour means you finally stopped overthinking and made a decision, right? I didn't waste time. Yes, Meredith, I accept the London offer. If the board still wants me, I want to be on a plane as soon as humanly possible. Meredith sounded thrilled. Of course we want you. The UK directors approved your profile months ago. We were just waiting on you. But why the sudden urgency? I thought you had some family matters to tie up. I glanced toward my bedroom door. Out in the living room, Miriam was cackling, telling Briar to relax and that now that they had a massive luxury condo, they should pop out 3 more kids to fill the space. I smiled. A dead, cold smile. My family matters have been completely resolved. Meredith, Meredith was a veteran executive. She knew when not to pry. Excellent. I'll trigger the onboarding sequence. HR will ping you the DocuSign links by 7 a.m. As for flights, the earliest first-class ticket I can get you is a red-eye tomorrow evening out of O'Hare. You'll land at Heathrow the following morning. Have your passport ready. Done, I said, and hung up. A massive weight evaporated from my chest. Some decisions feel like moving mountains when you're debating them. But the second you're forced to make the jump, you realize the heaviest burden isn't leaving. It's staying in a place where your soul is ground into dirt daily. I opened my contacts and found the number for Mr. Caldwell, a ruthless luxury real estate broker who specialized in high-end downtown Chicago properties. He had routinely bugged me, telling me my unit was prime real estate and would spark a bidding war if I ever listed it. His voice was thick with sleep. Hello? Mrs. Vance? Calling pretty late. Is there an emergency? I cut to the chase. Mr. Caldwell, I am liquidating my condo. The transaction happens tomorrow. I am willing to list it 20% under market value, but the buyer must pay entirely in cash. We go straight to the title company, sign the escrow documents, and hand over the keys immediately. Caldwell woke up instantly. Are you serious? Sloan, your unit, even in a cool market, would fetch at least $2.5 million. The interior is custom, the title is clear, and the location is A-tier. I am letting it go for $1.5 million. Non-negotiable, I replied. The absolute condition is that the wire transfer clears and the deed is signed away in 24 hours. I heard a sharp intake of breath over the receiver. If you chop the price that low, it'll cause a feeding frenzy. But why the fire sale, Sloan? Personal reasons. You just need to find a whale with liquid cash, no contingencies, no mortgage underwriting delays. I need absolute zero-leak confidentiality until the ink is dry. No walkthroughs before signing. Use the 3D virtual tour and photos you already have on file from the last appraisal. Caldwell thought for 3 seconds. I have a foreign investor client who has been hunting for an exact unit in River North for his daughter, who is starting medical school at Northwestern. They have the cash sitting in an escrow account right now. They've been outbid twice. If I float this price to them, they will sign blind. But you have to guarantee the title is clean. No liens, no second mortgages, no spouses on the deed, I enunciated perfectly. The deed is exclusively in the name of Sloan Kensington. It is a premarital asset held in a revocable trust. 0 liens, 0 mortgages. I will have the original paperwork at the title company tomorrow. Caldwell didn't hesitate. Done. I'll schedule a closing meeting with my client at the title office for 9 a.m. Have your documents ready. I'll handle the bloodbath. I ended the call. The black screen reflected my bruised face in the dark room, but the eyes staring back weren't those of a battered housewife trying to salvage a rotting marriage. They were the eyes of a general authorizing a tactical nuclear strike on a compromised battlefield. I pulled my Toomey carry-on out from under the bed and began packing. In reality, this sprawling condo was filled with my life. Designer clothes, hundreds of books, expensive art, custom ceramics, every object held a memory. But as I packed, I realized how little I actually needed to survive. My passport, my social security card, my MBA degrees, my corporate laptop, 2 tailored power suits, my ulcer medication, my medical records, and a framed photo of my parents. It all fit into one sleek suitcase. The high thread count sheets I picked out with Declan, the matching espresso mugs, the wedding album, the Le Creuset pans I abandoned, all of it. Not because I didn't care, but because I refused to bring anything to London that carried the stench of this marriage. As I was zipping up the luggage, heavy fists pounded on my bedroom door. Bang, bang, bang. Declan's voice slurred slightly from the wine. Unlock the door. Are you asleep? I shoved the suitcase into the back of my walk-in closet, smoothed out my clothes, and unlocked the door. Declan stood in the hallway, reeking of alcohol and greasy meat. He looked at my face. His eyes darted to the swelling and the bruising, which was already turning purple. He paused for a fraction of a second, and then looked away, entirely devoid of empathy. My mom says you need to hire the deep cleaners first thing in the morning. Briar is super pregnant. It's not good for her to wait around. Also, Holden wants to put a mini fridge in the guest room to store her organic milk and snacks. Order one on Amazon Prime right now so it gets here tomorrow. I looked at the man standing in front of me. Just hours after striking me across the face, his first words weren't, "Are you okay?" or "I'm so sorry." His first words were, "My mom says, clean the room. My mom says, buy a fridge. Keep serving my family." I nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll take care of it tomorrow." Perhaps my utter submission stroked his ego, because Declan looked highly satisfied. He swaggered into the room, tossed his wrinkled shirt onto a velvet chair, and flopped onto the mattress. "See? When you act rational, life is so much easier. Honestly, Sloane, I don't care how big of a boss you are at work. When you're in this house, you need to know your place. My mom isn't a stranger. Holden is my blood, and Briar is carrying the next Vance baby. Bending the knee a little bit doesn't kill you, does it?" I stood by the edge of the bed, watching him close his eyes as he delivered his pathetic, patriarchal sermon. I asked him in a voice as soft as a ghost, "Declan, if one day I didn't have this condo, or my corporate salary, or my title, would you still protect me?" He frowned, keeping his eyes shut. "Why do you ask weird psycho questions? Who says you're going to lose them? You're a grinder. Keep making that cash. Marriage is a partnership. Your money is our money. Stop asking stupid questions and let me sleep." I smiled a razor-thin smile. "Yeah, how stupid of me." Minutes later, his rhythmic snoring filled the room. I stood in the dark, staring at the face of the husband for whom I had once been willing to sacrifice my entire identity. He wasn't physically repulsive, but looking at him now, I felt nothing but profound disgust. Some people never change. It's just that one day, we decide to stop actively hallucinating, and we finally see the monsters they truly are. Around 2 a.m., I dragged a chair out onto the balcony. The Chicago night air was freezing, slicing right through my sweater. Below me, the city grid glowed, taxis blurring past, high-rises dotted with lit windows. Maybe someone in one of those apartments was sitting on the floor crying, just like I used to. I pulled out my phone and executed the final purge. I logged into my Chase portal and permanently canceled the Platinum Authorized User credit card Declan carried in his wallet. I deleted the recurring monthly wire transfer to Miriam's bank account. I changed the master passwords to every single financial account I owned. I drafted a high-priority email to my company's fleet management division, instructing them to immediately report the corporate SUV, which Declan drove to his mediocre job every day, as stolen, if it wasn't returned to the corporate lot by 5:00 p.m. tomorrow. I hired an elite logistics crew to pack up the remaining personal items in my corner office and ship them directly to a secure storage unit. Each digital execution took less than 60 seconds. But with every confirm button I tapped, I felt thick, heavy chains snapping off my wrists. For years I thought I was funding a family, but I had just been shoveling my life force into a black hole. I poured in my cash, my youth, my trust, and my health. In return, I got a backhand across the face and a know your place. I know my place, and starting tomorrow, my place would be untouchable. I barely slept. When I opened my eyes, the Chicago skyline was a pale, icy blue. Declan was still dead to the world, mouth hanging open, breathing out stale wine. I slipped out of bed like a shadow. I dressed in my sharpest, cream-colored Armani suit. I applied heavy, professional concealer to mask the violent bruise on my cheekbone. I pulled my hair back into a flawless, severe chignon. I put on the pearl earrings my father gave me, and I pulled my Toomey suitcase out from the closet. Before stepping out of the master suite, I took one last look at the king-sized bed, at the framed wedding portrait on the wall. The parasitic husband, sleeping soundly, had absolutely no idea that his luxurious free ride had a countdown timer of fewer than 12 hours. I didn't wake him. Some farewells only served to pollute a perfectly good morning. I rolled my suitcase into the living room. Miriam was already awake, sitting cross-legged on my sofa with a legal pad, scribbling furiously. Briar was lounging next to her, rubbing her belly and eating handfuls of my imported cashews. Holden was kicked back in my recliner, playing a game on his phone. Seeing me emerge in full corporate armor with a suitcase, Miriam's face pinched into a scowl. Where do you think you're going with that luggage? Don't tell me you're throwing a tantrum and running off to mommy and daddy. A married woman doesn't just flee the house because she was disciplined. I offered a perfectly calibrated fake smile. I have a critical corporate emergency, Miriam. I need to fly out of state for a few days. Miriam scoffed. Fly wherever you want, but before you leave, call the maid to prep Briar's room. Also, I did the math. Taking care of a newborn requires serious capital. Wire $3,000 to my account so I can hire a night nurse, buy the premium baby gear, and get a high-end HEPA air purifier for the living room. You have the cash. Don't make me nag you for it. Briar chimed in, chewing loudly. Yeah, Sloan. I'm not asking for much, but I'm popping this kid out soon. Buying nice things is an investment in your own nephew, right? Plus, I actually like the master bedroom better. The view of the skyline is gorgeous. You and Declan won't mind moving to the smaller guest room, will you? Holden didn't even look up from his phone, laughing. Come on, sis. If you're gonna play the rich, generous aunt, go all the way. The kid will thank you when he's older. I looked at the three leeches sitting in my multi-million-dollar condo, eating my food, demanding my paycheck, divvying up my bedrooms, and talking to me as if I should be on my knees, thanking them for the privilege. I wasn't even angry anymore. What is the point of being angry at a tick for sucking blood? You don't argue with it. You just burn it off your skin. I left my suitcase by the front door, unclasped my leather briefcase, and pulled out a stack of heavily redacted documents I had forged on my laptop the night before. I've thought it over carefully, I said, my voice smooth as silk. You guys are entirely right. Marriage is a joint venture. If this deed stays exclusively in my name, it's going to create an uncomfortable power dynamic for you all living here. People might gossip and say I'm using my wealth to bully my husband's family. Miriam's eyes lit up like slot machines. What exactly are you saying? I slid the papers across the glass coffee table toward her. I drafted the paperwork. If Declan agrees, we can go to the county clerk today and I will execute a quitclaim deed, transferring the title entirely into his name. As of today, he will be the sole owner of this property. He can decide who gets what room, what renovations to do. It will be 100% his. The living room went dead silent for 3 seconds. Then, Miriam snatched the papers off the table so fast she almost ripped them. Transfer it to Declan? For real? Holden jumped out of the recliner, his eyes wide. Are you serious, Sloan? The condo goes to Declan? Man, our family is set. Now that is a good sister-in-law. Briar suddenly forgot her pregnancy exhaustion. She sat up straight, her voice dripping with honey. I knew you loved your nephew, Sloan. Once I give birth, I'll totally help you. Swiffer the floors, I promise. I watched the raw, unfiltered greed mutate their faces. My heart was as calm as a frozen lake. We just need Declan's signature. Miriam scrambled up, bolted down the hallway, and banged on the master bedroom door. Declan, get your ass up. Your wife finally woke up and smelled the coffee. She's signing the condo over to you. Get up and sign the papers. A minute later, Declan stumbled out. His hair was a bird's nest, and his eyes were bleary. But the moment he heard the words signing the condo over, he was wide awake. He looked at me with a sickening mixture of suspicion and deep satisfaction. You finally thinking straight? He grunted. I nodded. Yes. I did a lot of reflecting last night. You are my husband. You deserve to have undeniable authority and equity in this household. Declan's posture completely relaxed. He swaggered over to the sofa, picked up the stack of papers, and skimmed them. He didn't understand complex legalese, but he saw the bolded words, quitclaim deed, transfer of ownership, and a massive, greedy smile stretched across his face. Miriam shoved a ballpoint pen into his hand. Sign it, son. Sign it right now. See? Sometimes you just have to apply a little physical discipline to make these modern women see reason. Once your name is on this deed, nobody can ever look down on the Vance family again. Declan clicked the pen. The tip hovered a millimeter over the signature line. Oh, wait, I said softly, raising one finger. I almost forgot one tiny, insignificant detail. His hand froze. What? I sat down in the armchair directly across from him, crossing my legs. My voice was completely flat. This condo currently has a $950,000 home equity line of credit pulled against it. I used the house as collateral for a massive private equity investment that went under. If you accept the transfer of the deed via this contract, you legally assume the totality of that debt. The combined principal and interest payments come out to exactly $6,000 a month. After you sign, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this videos. We can head over to Chase Bank this afternoon to subrogate the massive loan into your name. The pen slipped from Declan's fingers and clattered onto the glass table. All the blood instantly vanished from his face. Miriam, who had been grinning like a lottery winner, froze like a gargoyle. Briar stopped rubbing her belly. Holden swallowed audibly. I just sat there, maintaining my terrifyingly pleasant smile. What's wrong, Declan? Sign it. You are my husband, the alpha male, the pillar of this family. Your mother said this house belongs to you, so the nearly $1 million debt attached to it shouldn't scare a real man, right? The oxygen evaporated from the room. Declan stared at me, paralyzed. The arrogant satisfaction had been wiped from his face so fast it gave me whiplash, replaced by a sickly, chalky pallor that spread from his jaw to his hairline. Miriam's mouth hung open in silent horror. Holden, who was standing tall a second ago, literally took a step backward, as if the $950,000 debt was a physical bomb about to detonate on his chest. Briar clutched her stomach, but the fake frailty was gone. Her eyes darted frantically toward the exit. I scanned them one by one. I didn't feel a rush of euphoric victory. I just felt an icy, clinical detachment. So this was the great Vance family loyalty. The absolute second the word debt was introduced, the unbreakable bonds of mother, son, brother, and wife instantly dissolved into dust. Declan audibly gulped. What? What did you just say? This place is nearly $1 million in the hole? I nodded slowly. Correct. He leaped up, pointing a shaking finger at me. Are you out of your mind? Who gave you permission to leverage this property for $1 million? What the hell did you blow it on? I tilted my head, my voice dropping an octave. You literally just said this house was yours. If it's yours, why didn't you know about the loan? Or do you only want to claim the title when it's a free luxury penthouse, but wash your hands of it the second there's a liability? Declan's face flushed a violent crimson. Don't try to flip this on me, you psycho! You took out the loan, you pay the damn bank. I want absolutely nothing to do with it. Miriam, acting as if she had just woken up from a nightmare, snatched the papers off the table with trembling hands. She couldn't read the legal jargon, but hearing the numbers $6,000 a month had utterly shattered her reality. She threw the papers back down as if they were on fire. My God! You are an evil witch. You were trying to set a trap for my son. You drew up a fake transfer just to chain him to your massive debt. Why are you so demonic, Sloane? What did my family ever do to you to make you want to ruin my boy's life? I let out a soft, mocking laugh. You are fascinating, Miriam. 5 minutes ago, you were screaming that this condo belonged to Declan to preserve the Vance family's honor. You practically shoved the pen down his throat. Why is it that the moment money is owed, it's suddenly my exclusive problem? Miriam was temporarily speechless, but she quickly recovered and shrieked. Assets are shared in a marriage, but personal debts are your own cross to bear. Don't you dare try to drag my son down with you. I stared at her for a long time. I will engrave that sentence into my memory, Miriam. Holden frantically dragged his chair away from the table, letting out a nervous, high-pitched chuckle. Wow. Okay. Sloane, I think this is a highly personal issue between you and Declan. My wife is super pregnant. Just hearing about $1 million debt gives off horrible energy. I think we're gonna hit pause on the whole moving in thing. We're gonna head back to our place so Briar can de-stress. Briar instantly chimed in, her voice shaking. Yeah, Holden. My stomach is cramping up. Let's go home. Living in a house with that kind of negative financial aura, I'm terrified it's going to stress the baby out. I looked at her. Just yesterday, you were whining about how this condo had premium air quality and was the only safe place for the fetus. Why is it suddenly a hazard? Briar refused to make eye contact, looking down at her slides. Miriam whipped around to scream at her younger son. Where the hell do you think you're going? The problem isn't solved and you're bailing? But Holden had lost all his smug swagger. He awkwardly grabbed his wife's designer diaper bag and muttered, "Mom, you stay here with Declan. I'm getting Briar an Uber. I am absolutely not getting involved in a $1 million corporate debt scheme. When you guys sort this disaster out, call me." Without another word, he practically dragged Briar out the door. The boxes of baby formula, the red plastic basin, and the suitcases they had hauled in with such arrogant triumph the night before were left abandoned in the foyer. A pathetic monument to a hostile takeover that crashed and burned before it even began. I didn't try to stop them. I just watched the front door click shut. Before leaving, Briar cast one final, agonizing look at the master bedroom. She was mourning the loss of her free luxury life, but her regret was useless. She was much more terrified of the debt collector than she was eager for the skyline view. With the door shut, it was just me, Declan, and Miriam left in the living room. The air was thick and suffocating. Miriam collapsed onto the sofa, clutching her chest, still muttering, 950,000, $6,000 a month. Lord Jesus, who can survive that kind of debt? I sat across from her and calmly collected my forged papers, tapping them neatly against the glass. Relax, Miriam. Declan didn't sign, so he doesn't owe a dime. Hearing that, Declan seemed to remember how to breathe, but a second later he glared at me with pure paranoia. What the hell is your actual endgame here? I aligned the edges of the paper exactly the way I aligned financial spreadsheets at work. I wanted to give you the golden opportunity to be the undisputed alpha of this household, but you were too much of a coward to take it. Declan slammed his fist on the table. Who would be stupid enough to accept a house drowning in $1 million loan? Do you think I'm mathematically illiterate? You know what my take-home pay is. How the hell am I supposed to cover a $6,000 monthly premium? I lifted my chin and locked eyes with him. Then, during the entire 5 years of our marriage, did you ever once stop to ask how I paid the $2,000 HOA fees? The electric bill? The groceries? The monthly allowance for your mother? The thousands you loaned to Holden? The payments on the corporate SUV you drive to work? The Christmas gifts for your endless relatives? How did I pay for all of it? Declan's jaw locked. He had no answer. I kept going. You never asked because you operated under the delusion that my money grew on trees. You thought that because I earned it, it was my divine duty to bleed myself dry for you. Because in your eyes, I wasn't your partner. I was an ATM that knew how to cook, how to clean, and how to shut my mouth and look down when your mother insulted me. Declan's face contorted. Sloane, do not cross the line. I laughed out loud. Cross the line? You literally strike me across the face in front of your mother, and me spitting a few facts back at you is crossing the line? Your mother invites squatters into my home, guts my office, and demands my bedrooms, and you call that family. I protect my own financial assets, and you call it disrespect. Your family's logic is truly one of a kind. Miriam jumped up, pointing a shaky finger at me. Don't you give me your corporate lectures. You took out a massive debt behind your husband's back. You are deceitful. You don't deserve to be a daughter-in-law in this family. I stared directly at her and spoke very slowly. Good. Because I am officially resigning from the position. Declan and Miriam both froze. I picked up the papers, grabbed my briefcase, and stood up. I have a flight to catch for a work emergency. You two think long and hard about what you want to do next. If you change your minds and want to accept the deed along with the crushing debt, text me, and I'll arrange a Zoom call with the bank. But if not, from this minute forward, I suggest you stop referring to this property as the Vance family estate. I grabbed the handle of my Toomey suitcase. Seeing it, Declan furrowed his brow, stepping into my path. Where exactly are you going? I told you, a corporate emergency, out of state, he sneered. What kind of business trip happens right now? The situation with the condo isn't resolved. Are you trying to flee the state to dodge your creditors? I looked at him, completely deadpan. Are you afraid I'm fleeing? Or are you afraid I'm going to stop paying for your life? Declan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He growled, but he didn't dare raise his hand to me again. Maybe the dried blood still visible under my makeup scared him. Or maybe his brain was too overloaded trying to calculate if he could survive a $950,000 debt. I pushed past him. Before walking out the front door, I turned and surveyed the condo one last time. The trashed living room, the peanut shells ground into the Persian rug, the lingering stench of pot roast, Miriam, hyperventilating on the sofa, Declan, standing pale and useless in the center of the room. They had absolutely no idea that the $950,000 debt was nothing but a piece of printer paper I used to stress test their blackened hearts. This property had never been leveraged. The title was pristine, and absolute power rested solely in my hands. And in that brief span of 10 minutes, they had voluntarily signed their own death warrants into poverty, without even needing a pen. I took the elevator down to the parking garage, but I didn't get into the luxury SUV Declan used. It was registered to the company. A repo team would be picking it up by sunset. I ordered an Uber Black from the lobby. As the tinted Suburban merged onto the Chicago streets, my phone buzzed. A text from Caldwell, the broker. Buyer is locked in. $1. 5M cash in escrow. Closing set for 9 a.m. at the title company. They demand to see the original deed and verify your sole marital status regarding the asset. I replied, I am 5 minutes away. Maintain radio silence until the wire clears. Then I dialed Arthur Sterling. Uncle Arthur, I'm heading to the title company right now. The moment the sale is finalized, I'm coming straight to your office to sign the divorce petitions. Arthur sounded slightly taken aback. You're actually liquidating the River North property? Just like that? Yes, Uncle Arthur. I've thought it through. But Sloane, your parents bought you that place as your way back if things went south. I looked out the tinted window. The morning downtown rush hour was in full swing. People in trench coats rushing to the L train. Delivery trucks navigating intersections. I saw a young mother on the sidewalk holding a toddler's hand, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. A sudden rush of heat hit the back of my eyes. I know, Uncle Arthur. It was supposed to be my safe harbor, but it's been infected with too many toxic memories. I'm not selling it because I'm running away. I'm selling it to completely sever the infection. Arthur sighed, his voice softening into the uncle I knew. All right, kid. As long as you're thinking clearly, demand a cashier's check or an immediate wire transfer to a brand new, sole proprietor bank account. Do not let a single cent touch a joint account. I'll handle the divorce logistics. Understood. At 8:45 a.m., I walked into the glass-walled conference room of the title company. Caldwell was already there, pouring coffee. Next to him sat a wealthy foreign investor and his daughter. They needed a luxury property immediately, no questions asked. After their lawyer aggressively reviewed the original deed, the prenuptial property addendums, the clear title search, and the legal proof that it was a non-marital asset under Illinois law, the investor nodded sharply. The title is flawless. The price is a steal. We are wiring the funds immediately. The entire process was violently fast. Anyone watching would never believe I was signing away the home where I had planted my youth and my hopes. The escrow agent monotonously read off the clauses. Sole and separate property, free of all encumbrances. Voluntary transfer. Full cash consideration. Prior to handover, when they handed me the heavy Mont Blanc pen to sign the final transfer, a sharp pain flared in my chest. Not because of the money or the real estate, but because for a split second, I remembered the naive 20-something girl who stood in that empty condo 5 years ago, excitedly deciding where to place the dining table, where to hang the wedding photos, where the future children would run and play. That girl genuinely believed she was going to be happy. I grieved for her, but I couldn't live the rest of my life tending to the grave of a dead dream. I signed it. Sloane Kensington. Those 2 words, etched in blue ink on the heavy cardstock, acted as a pair of industrial shears, severing the final tether that connected me to that building. 10 minutes later, a push notification from Chase Bank lit up my phone screen. A wire transfer of $1,500,000 had cleared into a brand new, isolated account. Caldwell let out a massive sigh of relief and beamed. Congratulations, Sloane. The buyers want the keys tonight so their cleaning and contracting crews can get in first thing tomorrow. Do you need an extension to get your things out? I shook my head. No. I have everything that matters. Whatever is left in that unit is the buyer's problem. I'll leave the master keys and the fob with the building concierge. You handle the physical handover. Caldwell gave me a highly analytical look, sensing the absolute chaos brewing behind the scenes, but he knew better than to ask. Understood. I'll take it from here. Leaving the title company, I walked 3 blocks to Arthur Sterling's law firm. The paperwork was already stacked on his mahogany desk. The contested divorce petition, the timeline of events, the exhibit list, the emergency ex parte motion to freeze his access to my accounts, and the petition for a domestic violence restraining order. I sat down and pulled the encrypted USB drive from my purse. Here is the 4K footage of the physical assault, Uncle Arthur. I also included the audio files of Miriam and Holden trying to forcefully occupy the unit. Arthur plugged it into his iMac. Watching the high-definition footage of Declan winding up and striking me, Arthur's jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked in his cheek. This kid is a dead man walking. I didn't reply. Arthur printed out the final signature pages and slid them toward me. Read the grounds for divorce. If you're absolutely certain, sign. I skimmed the crisp legal text. My name, Declan's name, the wedding date. Irreconcilable differences exacerbated by physical abuse, financial exploitation, and malicious interference by in-laws. Those sterile, bureaucratic sentences summarized 5 years of my bleeding soul. I signed my name for the second time that morning. Once to sell a multi-million-dollar asset, and once to sell off the illusion of a man I once loved. Arthur gathered the files. From this second forward, I am your absolute firewall. He does not speak to you. His mother does not speak to you. If they call, let it go to voicemail, and send the recordings to my paralegal. And concerning this London move, do not let anyone outside of corporate know your forwarding address. I nodded. I'm heading to O'Hare this afternoon, Uncle Arthur. Arthur looked at me, a deep sadness in his old eyes. That fast? Yes. It's an executive transfer. He sighed heavily. It's good to put an ocean between you and this mess. The distance will force you to detox. But Sloane, don't let them find out through the legal grapevine. Hearing my parents mentioned, the titanium armor around my heart cracked. From last night until this very second, I had been an ice queen dealing with my abusers, a stoic client for my lawyer, a ruthless negotiator for my broker. But remembering my mother's tearful eyes and my father's protective voice, I suddenly felt like a little girl who had scraped her knee and just wanted a hug. I know, Uncle Arthur, I whispered. That afternoon, I sat alone in a high-end coffee shop near the law firm. An overpriced oat milk latte was going cold in front of me. I pulled out my phone and stared at my mother's contact photo for a long time. In the end, I didn't hit dial, not because I was hiding it, but because I knew the absolute second I heard her voice, I would shatter into a million pieces and violently sob in the middle of a crowded cafe. I promised myself that the moment I landed in London and secured my flat, I would FaceTime them and confess everything. A new text from Declan popped up. Where the hell are you? You've been gone for hours. My mom says you need to book the maid service right now. And regarding that massive debt, when you get home tonight, we are having a very serious sit-down. Don't think you can just run away and scare me into paying it. I read it and swiped it away. 10 minutes later, another text. Where is the SUV? I went down to the parking garage and your spot is empty. Did you take it? I need to get to work. I still didn't reply. Shortly after, my phone started vibrating. Declan Vance flashed on the screen. I flipped the phone face down on the marble table. Let him sweat a little longer. The most devastating hurricanes always begin with an eerie, dead silent sky. By late afternoon, I was walking through Terminal 5 at O'Hare International. The wheels of my Toomey suitcase hummed a steady rhythm against the polished terrazzo floors. Inside my leather tote was my passport, my boarding pass to London Heathrow, a digitally executed VP contract, and a banking app showing $1.5 million in liquid cash. I cleared TSA pre-check with zero emotion. Sitting in the Polaris first-class lounge, I unlocked my phone one last time on its US cellular network. There were 22 missed calls from Declan, followed by a frantic text from Miriam. Where the hell are you hiding? Get your ass home immediately. The spare room isn't clean. Briar is about to pop. Stop acting like a spoiled brat and do your job. I stared at Miriam's text, and a genuine, breathy laugh escaped my lips. Up until this very second, they genuinely believed I was just throwing a tantrum. They were 100% convinced that tonight, I would walk back through that door, roll up my sleeves, scrub the baseboards, wire them thousands of dollars, beg for Declan's forgiveness, and resume my role as the Vance family's personal ATM. They had no idea that the locks had already been changed. And more importantly, they had no idea that the person knocking on the door tonight wouldn't be me, but the ruthless property manager of the new billionaire owner. I locked my screen and sank into the leather lounge chair. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago sunset was bleeding orange and violet across the tarmac. Massive Boeing 777s were lining up on the runway, taking people to new destinations, some for vacation, some for business, some returning to loved ones. And me? I was flying away to save my own life. One final text pushed through from Declan. Sloan, do not cross the line. Come home tonight. We will talk this out rationally. I stared at the glowing pixels, typed out a single sentence, and hit send. Stay home tonight and greet the guests. The second it said delivered, I popped the SIM tray open, pulled out my US SIM card, snapped it cleanly in half, and dropped the pieces into the lounge trash can. The boarding announcement for British Airways Flight 295 echoed through the lounge. I grabbed my bag, stood up, and walked straight toward the gate. Behind me lay the multi-million-dollar condo they foolishly treated as a spoil of war. Ahead of me was a foreign sky, cold but brilliantly clean. And somewhere deep in the city skyline, Declan, Miriam, Holden, and Briar were still daydreaming about spending a luxurious, rent-free year in my penthouse. Let them dream for a few more hours. Because there are certain dreams that, the second the doorbell rings, violently mutate into inescapable nightmares. While I was scanning my boarding pass, back in the River North condo, Declan was pacing like a caged animal. He had dialed my number another dozen times, only to be met with the automated carrier message. The number you have dialed is currently unallocated or out of service. At first, he assumed I had just turned on airplane mode to punish him. But as the sun began to dip below the skyline, a cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. Miriam was sitting on my crate and barrel sofa, her legal pad filled with a highly expensive shopping list of things I supposedly needed to buy for Briar's baby. She still hadn't abandoned her crusade to commandeer the apartment. To her, the $950,000 debt I had mentioned that morning was terrifying, yes, but after marinating in her own greed all day, she convinced herself it was a bluff. She clicked her tongue. I'm telling you, Declan, she was just blowing smoke. Her rich mommy and daddy bought her this place in cash. How the hell would she secretly take out $1 million equity loan without you noticing? I bet you anything she fabricated that story to test your dominance. Declan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the darkening city. If she made it up, then what? Miriam slapped the glass coffee table. Then it means she wanted to see if you had the spine to take ownership. Rich women pull these psychological tests all the time. You should have just signed the damn quitclaim deed this morning. We could have verified the debt later. Now she's taken the paperwork and vanished, and I am sick over it. Declan spun around, his stress boiling over. It's real easy for you to play armchair quarterback, Mom. What if the debt was real? Were you going to casually spot me $6,000 a month to keep the bank away? Miriam was temporarily stunned, but quickly pivoted back to insulting him. You are such a coward. What kind of man are you? You hear the word debt, and you wet your pants. Whatever. Tonight, when she walks through that door, you play nice. Butter her up. Sweet-talk her into showing you the actual bank statements. If there is no debt, you physically force her to sign that deed over to you tonight. A man needs his name on the real estate to command respect. Declan didn't respond. He pulled out his phone and stared at my final text message. Stay home tonight and greet the guests. The more he stared at it, the more his skin crawled. What guests? Corporate executives? The real estate broker? A bank auditor? He tried calling me again. Beep, beep, beep. Call failed. A violent shiver ripped down his spine. Outside, Chicago had fallen completely dark. The neon glow of the surrounding skyscrapers spilled into the living room, casting long, sickly shadows across the walls. The Persian rug was still covered in peanut shells. Briar's abandoned diaper bag sat pathetic and ignored in the corner. The massive pot of congealed roast beef in the kitchen was now covered in a thick layer of white, solidified fat. Miriam stood up, pacing aggressively. This doesn't feel right. I need to call Holden and tell him to get back here. Briar's stuff is still here. We are not losing a $2 million penthouse just because Sloane wanted to play a prank. She dialed Holden. He picked up after 5 rings, sounding highly annoyed. What, Mom? Briar is exhausted. I just got her settled into our place. Miriam lowered her voice into a conspiratorial whisper. Pack your bags and get back here, right now. I figured it out. Sloane was bluffing. This place doesn't have a massive debt. She made the whole thing up to scare your brother away from the deed. Holden was silent for a heavy moment. Mom, are you insane? Sloane looked dead serious. And $1 million corporate debt isn't something you just make up as a joke. Miriam snarled into the receiver. You are such an idiot. If there was really a debt, she never would have offered to sign the house over. She was testing us. Get back here before she gets home so we can lock this down. Briar is about to give birth, and your apartment is a biohazard. Do you want my first grandson breathing in black mold? In the background, Briar's whiny voice echoed through the phone. Holden, tell your mother that unless Sloane shows me a certified zero-balance bank statement, I am not stepping foot in that cursed apartment. Bad credit is horrible energy for the baby. Miriam's face flushed purple. What did she say? The youngest daughter-in-law dares to give me ultimatums? Holden scrambled to do damage control. No, Mom, it's not that. Briar is just hormonal and panicking. Look, I'll come by tomorrow to grab the rest of our bags. Let Declan and Sloane fight it out tonight. If the house is clear, we'll move back in. I gotta go. He hung up. Miriam screamed a stream of profanities at the dead phone. Declan, watching his family devour itself, felt incredibly nauseous. He walked to the fridge, ripped open a cheap beer, and chugged it. The cold liquid hit his stomach, but it did absolutely nothing to extinguish the raging anxiety in his chest. At exactly that moment, the doorbell chimed. Ding-dong. A perfectly normal, polite sound. But in the dead-silent condo, it made Declan flinch like a gunshot. Miriam whipped her head toward the door. It's gotta be Sloane. Coming home and ringing her own doorbell to be dramatic. What a psycho. Declan slammed the beer can on the counter, adjusted his collar, and forcefully arranged his features into a mask of patriarchal dominance. I got it. I am laying down the law tonight. He marched to the foyer, already rehearsing his aggressive monologue. He was going to lecture me on mutual respect, on how a woman's salary doesn't make her the boss, and how financial secrets destroy marriages. He ripped the door open. But it wasn't me standing in the hallway. Standing in front of Declan was a sharply dressed, middle-aged man in a tailored suit, holding a thick leather portfolio. Flanking him were 2 massive security guards from the building's concierge desk, and behind them stood a crew of 4 burly men wearing uniforms for a premium commercial moving company. Declan's brow furrowed in severe confusion. Who the hell are you? The man in the suit looked at him with the cold, dead eyes of a corporate assassin. Good evening. I am the legal representative for the new proprietary owner of this unit. As of 3 p.m. this afternoon, Miss Sloane Kensington executed a cash sale transfer of this real estate. Per the escrow agreement, physical possession takes place immediately tonight. We are here to secure the premises. Declan's brain short-circuited. He literally couldn't process the English language. What? What did you just say? The representative flipped open his portfolio. Here is the notarized, stamped warranty deed of sale. Here is the confirmation of the cleared wire transfer. And here is the turnover authorization signed by the escrow agent and the building management. This property is now the exclusive asset of my client. I am formally instructing you, and anyone else inside, to collect your personal effects and vacate the premises immediately. Declan lunged forward and snatched the papers out of the man's hands. His eyes darted frantically across the bold legal print. He didn't understand title law, but he saw my signature, the notary seal, the astronomical sale price, and the name of a foreign LLC. Impossible, Declan stammered, his voice cracking. You are running a scam. This is a marital home. My wife cannot legally liquidate a marital asset without my signature. The representative didn't blink. According to the state of Illinois and the Chicago Title Company, this property was held in a premarital revocable trust exclusively under Miss Kensington's name. It was purchased prior to your marriage with zero commingling of funds. There were zero liens, zero mortgages, and zero co-owners. She possessed absolute, unilateral authority to liquidate the asset. The transaction is 100% legally binding. Miriam, hearing the shouting, waddled into the foyer. She saw the legal documents shaking in her son's hands, the massive security guards, and the moving crew holding industrial trash bags. The blood drained from her face. What is going on? Who sold a house? What house? The representative looked at her with utter disdain. This unit has been sold by Miss Kensington to a new buyer. We are here to take possession. Miriam staggered backward, gripping the doorframe to keep from collapsing. No, that's a lie. She literally told us this morning there was a $950,000 debt on this place. She said whoever took the deed had to pay it. How could anyone buy a house drowning in debt? The representative frowned in genuine confusion. What debt? The title search was immaculate. There are zero encumbrances or HELOCs on this property. The ledger is entirely clean. We verified it with Chase Bank before wiring the $1.5 million. That sentence acted as a second, invisible backhand across Declan's face. But this one didn't sting his flesh. It violently detonated his greed, his ego, and his cowardice all at once. There was no debt. There was no $950,000 loan. There was no $6,000 monthly payment. The entire thing had been a psychological trap, and he had flinched. Out of sheer terror, he had physically pushed a $1.5 million cash asset out of his own life. Miriam realized it a second later. She collapsed onto the hardwood floor of the foyer, violently slapping her own thighs. Oh my God, she played us. She played us like fools. Declan, she was testing you. If you had just signed that paper this morning, this $2 million penthouse would be yours. Why are you such a spineless idiot, Declan? Why are you such a coward? Declan's face shifted from stark white to violent red, and then back to white. He spun toward the representative, saliva flying from his lips. I'm not leaving. I live here. My clothes are here. You have no legal right to evict me without a 30-day court notice. The representative calmly closed his leather folder. You can refuse to leave. However, the building management is standing right next to me, and we have already preemptively contacted the Chicago Police Department to report an active trespassing in a privately owned, vacant unit. I highly advise you to cooperate. You are permitted to take your clothing, laptops, and personal hygiene items. All fixed furniture and large appliances were included in the cash sale and belonged to the new owner. Miriam scrambled up off the floor and tried to physically block the hallway. Over my dead body. The furniture belongs to the Vance family. The massive TV, the leather sectional, the washer and dryer, it's all ours. The representative sighed, signaling the movers to step forward. Per the turnover contract, any assets not removed by the previous owner have been forfeited. If you wish to dispute the division of marital property, I suggest you contact Miss Kensington's attorney, Arthur Sterling. Here is his card. The name Arthur Sterling hit Declan like a taser. He remembered the security camera in the living room. The slap. The audio of him screaming. A wave of pure ice washed over his internal organs. Just then, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. Holden and Breyer stepped out, carrying the rest of their duffel bags. Seeing the wall of security guards and movers at the door, Holden froze in his tracks. What the hell is happening, Mom? Miriam whipped around, sobbing hysterically. Sloane sold the condo! She sold it out from under us! She lied to your brother about a fake debt, sold the place for cash, and vanished with millions. Breyer's jaw dropped. She clutched her belly and physically recoiled, terrified of being dragged into a legal nightmare. Sold it? But what about my baby stuff? My organic formula is in the kitchen. Holden glared at his older brother, his voice cracking with panic and betrayal. Declan! What the actual hell? How did you let Sloane sell the apartment behind your back? Declan, completely pushed past his psychological breaking point, exploded. How did I let it happen? Do you think I signed off on this? This is all your fault. You two begging to move in here, Mom screaming and demanding bedrooms. You pushed her over the edge and she went scorched earth. Holden immediately threw his hands up in defense. Whoa, bro. Do not pin this on me. You were the one bragging about how big your house was. Mom told us to come. You're the man of the house, and you couldn't even control your own wife. Now you're blaming us? Miriam shrieked at the top of her lungs. Shut up, both of you. Start grabbing our stuff. Call Sloane. Tell her to reverse the wire transfer. Declan, functioning on pure adrenaline, ripped out his phone and dialed my number again. Beep, beep, beep. He tried iMessage. Not delivered. He tried WhatsApp. Blocked. I had evaporated from his existence, in a way he lacked the mental capacity to comprehend. Meanwhile, the professional moving crew had seamlessly bypassed Miriam and begun bagging up Declan's clothes under the watchful eye of building security. They weren't violent, but they were incredibly fast and entirely indifferent to the Vance family's screaming. They threw Declan's suits into cardboard boxes. They kicked Briar's diaper bags out into the hallway. Anything that didn't have a clear owner was aggressively photographed by the representative and logged. Miriam chased a mover down the hall, screeching, "That throw blanket is mine! That Le Creuset pot is mine! Lord Jesus, my family was so perfect! Why is this happening to us?" The building manager finally stepped in, his voice echoing loudly. "Ma'am, sir, I need you to lower your voices immediately. If you continue to disturb the residents on this floor, I will have you physically restrained by CPD." Hearing the threat of police, Miriam instantly snapped her mouth shut. She didn't care about humiliating herself in front of me, but she was mortified of being seen as poor trash in front of the ultra-wealthy neighbors. Doors down the hallway were already cracking open. Wealthy tech bros and doctors peeked out, their eyes piercing Miriam's bloated ego. Just 24 hours ago, she was pacing my living room, ordering me around like a feudal lord, fantasizing about hosting Thanksgiving here to make her country town friends jealous. Tonight, she was clutching a plastic garbage bag full of cheap clothes in a public hallway, being evicted like a squatter. Declan couldn't take the humiliation. He aggressively shoved the representative's shoulder. "I'm suing you. I'm suing the buyer. I am her husband. I have equity in that real estate. You think you can just flash a checkbook and throw a family onto the street?" The representative brushed off his shoulder and stared at Declan with lethal pity. "You are more than welcome to retain counsel and file a civil suit. But as of this exact second, this property is legally owned by my client. Your name is absent from the deed. You possess no lease agreement. You hold no legal residency status. Under the eyes of the law, you are a hostile trespasser. Leave." Every word was a nail in the coffin. Declan was rendered entirely mute. For 5 years, he had pumped out his chest, bragging to his buddies that he owned a multi-million-dollar penthouse. But when the blinding light of the law was applied, his status as a homeowner was thinner than a wet paper towel. An hour later, the brutal execution was over. The heavy front door was slammed shut. The smart lock code was instantly wiped and reset. The representative texted the new billionaire owner that the unit was secure, and he left with the security guards. In the long, carpeted hallway, only 4 people remained, surrounded by a pathetic mountain of trash bags, cardboard boxes, and cheap suitcases. Declan stood in the center of the debris. His phone gripped so tightly in his hand the screen was cracking, his eyes bloodshot and unblinking. Miriam sat slumped against the wall, her hair a chaotic mess, violently sobbing and whispering curses at my name. Holden stood with his arms crossed, glaring at the floor. "Now what, Holden? I am 36 weeks pregnant and sitting in a hallway. You promised me a luxury nursery. Where is it?" "We're homeless," Holden snapped. "Why are you screaming at me? Scream at Declan. He's the idiot who couldn't keep his wife in line." Declan whipped his head around and roared, "Shut your mouth. If you hadn't demanded to leech off my house, she never would have sold it." Holden let out a dark, mocking laugh. "Your house? Talk is cheap, bro. Who slapped Sloane across the face yesterday? Who screamed at her in front of everyone? It wasn't me, tough guy." The words hit Declan like a semi-truck. He froze, the air leaving his lungs. It was true. He had slapped me. He had driven me out the door. He was the one who believed he had the divine right to domestically abuse his wife into submission. He was the architect of his own destruction. But cowards are allergic to accountability. They require a scapegoat to survive. His mother, his brother, the economy, and ultimately me. Miriam suddenly lunged forward and grabbed Holden's jacket. Holden, call an Uber. Take me and your brother back to your apartment for a few days. We have nowhere else to go. Holden's face morphed into sheer panic. Mom, our apartment is 500 square feet. Briar is heavily pregnant. The place is packed to the ceiling with baby boxes. If you and Declan come, where the hell are you going to sleep? The bathtub? Miriam looked at her youngest son as if he had just stabbed her. What are you saying? I am the mother who birthed you. I am on the street, and you're telling me you don't have room? Briar instantly jumped in, her voice shrill with anxiety. Miriam, please, you have to be reasonable. My blood pressure is spiking. The doctor said no stress. We live in a studio. You and Declan need to go book a Motel 6 near the interstate tonight and figure it out tomorrow. Miriam clutched her chest, gasping for air. My God. My own flesh and blood is abandoning me in a hallway. Declan let out a dry, hacking laugh. It was the most pathetic sound imaginable. You see this, Mom? Our family loves to preach about how blood is thicker than water. But the absolute millisecond the money runs out, everyone scatters like rats. Miriam spun around and punched Declan in the shoulder. And what about you? If you weren't such a moron, if you hadn't hit your wife, if you hadn't wet yourself over a fake loan, we would be sitting in a multi-million-dollar penthouse right now. Declan didn't fight back. He dropped his head, picked up his suit jacket from a box, and sat down on the floor, utterly defeated. For the very first time in his 32 years of life, the delusion evaporated, and he saw the naked, brutal truth. The penthouse was never his. The corporate SUV he bragged about wasn't his. The mediocre job he held was secured through my father's connections. The premium stakes, the cash allowances, the arrogant facade of being the alpha patriarch, it was all propped up by me. Now that the pillar had walked away, the entire Vance family structure collapsed into rubble. At that exact moment, high above the Atlantic Ocean, I was sitting in a lie-flat pod in the first-class cabin of a Boeing 777. My phone was in airplane mode. The shattered U.S. SIM card was rotting in a Chicago trash can. I stared out the window. The blinking lights of the aircraft wing cut through the pitch-black night. The plane hit cruising altitude. I pulled the plush duvet over my shoulders and closed my eyes. Inside my head, the screaming had stopped. I couldn't hear Miriam's shrill demands. I couldn't hear Holden's cynical laughter. I didn't see Briar lounging on my furniture like royalty. I didn't feel the burning sting of Declan's hand on my face. There was only a massive, expanding void. The terrifying, beautiful void of absolute freedom. Freedom rarely arrives with marching bands and confetti. It usually arrives after you have been completely gutted, after you have lost massive pieces of yourself, and after you have buried a version of your life you once desperately loved. As the jet engines roared, a sharp pang hit my chest. I knew that as of tonight, I had no home in Chicago. The condo I poured my soul into belonged to a stranger. The marriage I bent over backward to save was headed for a judge's gavel. The concept of family had vaporized in a single afternoon. But weirdly, I wasn't scared. I felt weightless. The plane pierced through a thick layer of clouds, leaving the North American continent behind. I looked down into the dark abyss and whispered to the woman who had endured 5 years of silent torture. Sloane, you're free. Down on the ground, Declan was still frantically dialing my dead number. He had absolutely no idea that the final parting gift I had left for him hadn't even detonated yet. Roughly 30 minutes after being forcibly evicted, Declan's phone rang. It wasn't me. The caller ID showed the global HR director of his logistics company. He swiped to answer, his voice agitated. Hello? What is it? The HR director's voice was aggressively corporate and devoid of empathy. Mr. Vance, I am calling to inform you that following an emergency review of your quarterly performance metrics and chronic absenteeism, the executive board has voted to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Your severance package and COBRA paperwork have been overnighted to your address on file. Declan felt like he had been struck by lightning. What? Terminated? I've been there for 4 years. You can't just fire me at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Illinois is an at-will employment state, Mr. Vance, the director replied coldly. Furthermore, the corporate fleet SUV you have been operating is registered as the private asset of Miss A. Sloane Kensington, not a company vehicle. A repossession agency has been dispatched to recover the asset. If you attempt to hide the vehicle, it will be reported to the police as Grand Theft Auto. Have a good evening. Click. Declan froze, the phone slipping from his grip and clattering onto the hallway floor. Miriam saw his face drain of whatever blood he had left. A wave of nauseating dread hit her. What happened, Declan? Declan stared at the wall. I'm fired. Miriam's mouth opened in a silent scream. Holden, standing a few feet away, went rigid. Briar stopped sobbing. The entire hallway plunged into a suffocating, terrifying silence. No house, no car, no job, no wife. Everything Declan used to prop himself up as a respectable, successful man had been systematically dismantled and incinerated in a span of 6 hours. Miriam, trembling violently, slid down the wall until she hit the floor. Lord Jesus, where are we supposed to go? Declan buried his face in his hands, his fingers digging into his scalp. His voice was a broken rasp. I don't know. I don't know. 3 simple words, but they were enough to finally break Miriam's spirit. She realized she no longer had a wealthy, powerful eldest son to brag about. Sitting in front of her was a 30-something unemployed, homeless man who had just been aggressively ejected from society by the exact woman he thought he could beat into submission. A freezing draft blew down the high-rise hallway. Declan sat among the trash bags, staring at the heavy oak door of my former condo. The smart lock glowed red. Behind that door was the living room he used to rule. The kitchen where I cooked his meals. The bedroom where he slept like a baby after striking his wife across the face, never once caring if I was in pain. Now, he was locked out. Not because I was a cruel monster, but because he had literally shoved me out the window, forcing me to learn how to fly. The elevator chimed again. A group of wealthy residents stepped out, saw the pathetic scene, and slowed their pace, whispering to each other. Miriam aggressively hid her face in her jacket. Holden grabbed Briar's arm and physically turned her away. Declan just sat there, paralyzed. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands balled into fists so tight his knuckles were white. He wanted to scream. He wanted to punch a hole in the drywall. He wanted to drag me back by my hair and force me to fix his life. But I was currently 30,000 feet in the air, and for the first time in 5 years, he had to face the freezing concrete floor all by himself. That night, Declan and Miriam ended up in a $60 a night motel off Interstate 90. Holden only drove them to the parking lot, dumped their bags on the asphalt, and sped off, claiming Briar was having contractions. Miriam watched the taillights of her youngest son's car disappear into the dark. Tears of bitter hatred streamed down her face. She always believed that raising boys was the ultimate insurance policy for a luxurious old age. She forgot that when you raise a son to be a selfish parasite, he grows into an adult who will happily feed off his own mother. Inside the dingy motel room, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and bleach, Miriam sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, clutching a plastic bag of clothes and weeping uncontrollably. Declan sat on the other bed. He opened his phone, scrolling back years into his camera roll until he found a photo from our wedding day. In the picture, I was wearing a Vera Wang gown, smiling so radiantly it physically hurt his chest to look at it. That woman had desperately wanted to build an empire with him, but he didn't know how to protect her. He let his mother treat her like a maid. He let his brother extort her. He let his sister-in-law humiliate her. And in the final act, he used his own hand to shatter the last remaining bridge between them. Declan touched the glowing screen and whispered into the dark, "Sloane, where are you?" No one answered, just the violent rattle of the cheap AC unit in the window. Thousands of miles away, the Boeing 777 began its descent. When the plane touched down at London Heathrow, the sky outside was thick with morning fog. I rolled my Toomey bag through customs, following the sea of international travelers. The glowing signage in English and a dozen other languages made me feel completely detached from reality. After a sleepless red-eye, my body was running on fumes, but my brain was operating at maximum voltage. I no longer heard Miriam's shrieking, Holden's pathetic begging, or Briar's whining. I no longer felt the phantom sting of Declan's hand. Ahead of me was a sprawling, ancient city, a heavy gray sky, and a brand new life I was going to build brick by brick, entirely for myself. A corporate liaison was waiting for me at arrivals, a sharp American woman who had been stationed in the UK for years. She held a digital tablet with my name. Miss Kensington? I'm Meredith's associate, Chloe. I'll be getting you settled into Mayfair today. The corporate townhome is fully prepped. The driver is out front. Would you like to stop for an English breakfast before we head in? I was about to politely decline, but my stomach let out a violent growl. Aside from plain food and anxiety, I hadn't had a real meal in 2 days. I nodded. Yes. That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Chloe glanced at my face. The heavy concealer was wearing off, and the purple edge of the bruise was peeking through. She didn't ask a single question. She just took my suitcase and led me to the waiting black Mercedes. On the drive from Heathrow into central London, the historic architecture blurred past through the mist. The streets were pristine, the traffic orderly. It felt like another planet compared to the chaotic war zone I had just fled. I rested my head against the cool glass window, and suddenly, without warning, hot tears began streaming down my face. I wasn't crying because I missed Declan. I wasn't mourning the River North condo. I was crying for me. I was crying for the woman who spent 5 years contorting herself into a pretzel to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect bank account. I cried for the woman who swallowed her pride to wire money to a deadbeat brother-in-law, who forced a smile when her mother-in-law insulted her cooking, who stayed up until 2:00 a.m. waiting for a husband who was out drinking, and who quietly popped ulcer medication in the bathroom because nobody in that house cared if she was in agony. I realized that while I was inside that marriage, I literally didn't have the luxury to cry. Crying was considered starting drama. Even if I broke down, no one was going to hand me a tissue. It was only now, safely an ocean away, that my body finally allowed itself to mourn the abuse. Chloe saw me crying in the rearview mirror. She didn't offer fake platitudes. She just quietly reached into the center console and handed me a box of premium tissues. I took one and whispered, "Thank you." The corporate flat in Mayfair was stunning. It wasn't as sprawling as my Chicago penthouse, but it was dripping with historic charm and modern luxury. Hardwood herringbone floors, a marble fireplace, a bright, newly renovated kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street where the leaves were turning gold. On the kitchen island sat sparkling water, fresh artisan bread, fruit, and a welcome packet from the London Executive Board. After Chloe left, I locked the heavy deadbolt and stood in the center of the living room. There was no smell of greasy meat, no peanut shells, no voices barking demands, no one ripping through my closets, no one telling me to hand over my bedroom, empty my bank account, or know my place. The profound silence was deafening. I hauled my suitcase into the master suite, hung up my blazers, and immediately stepped into the rainfall shower. The scalding water hit my skin, making the bruise on my cheek throb. I closed my eyes and let the water wash the Chicago smog, the airport grime, the stench of the motel-bound Vance family, and the ghost of my marriage straight down the drain. Wrapped in a plush bathrobe, I sat by the window overlooking the London street. The sun was finally burning through the fog. Back in the States, my parents were probably drinking their morning coffee. I swapped the SIM card in my phone to the new UK corporate number, took a deep breath, and sent a FaceTime request to my mother. She answered on the first ring. Her face popped onto the screen, looking a little older, her hair a bit grayer. My father appeared behind her, holding his reading glasses. My mother looked at me, her face morphing from joy to sheer horror. "Sloane? Where are you, honey? You look exhausted." And, "Oh my God, what happened to your face? Is that a bruise?" That single question shattered the dam. The stoic corporate executive vanished, and I hugged my knees, sobbing into the phone like a traumatized child. "Mom." The word choked in my throat. All the degradation, the physical violence, the betrayal, it all erupted. My mother panicked, pressing her face to the screen. "Sloane, talk to me. Was it Declan? Did that bastard put his hands on you?" My father's face instantly darkened. He didn't speak, but his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would shatter. I cried for 5 straight minutes before I could form a sentence. I told them everything. I told them about Miriam moving the family in without asking, about Holden and Breyer demanding the master bedroom, about how offering a luxury postpartum clinic was met with screaming insults. I told them how Declan walked in, didn't ask a single question, and slapped me so hard I hit the wall. I told them about the fake $950,000 debt I used to expose their greed. I told them I sold the River North condo, filed for a contested divorce, and took an executive transfer to London. My mother wept openly. My father sat down heavily in his leather armchair. His fists were balled up, the veins in his forearms bulging. It took him a long time to speak. When he did, his voice was thick with gravel, but carrying the force of a sledgehammer. You did the exact right thing. I looked at him through the blurry screen. I'm so sorry, Dad. The condo you guys bought me. I liquidated it. My father aggressively shook his head. Your mother and I didn't buy you that real estate to be a museum piece. We bought it to be your armor. If liquidating that asset bought your permanent freedom from those parasites, then the condo did exactly what it was designed to do. Money can be printed. Houses can be built. But I will be damned if I let my daughter's soul be ground into dirt just to preserve the illusion of a happy marriage. My mother wiped her face, her voice fierce. I warned you on your wedding day. If you marry the wrong man, you cut the cord. Let people gossip, let them whisper. They don't live in your skin. You are the one getting hit. You are the one suffering. And it is ripping your parents' hearts to shreds. I bit my lip, tasting the cut. I always thought that if I was just patient, the marriage would survive. I thought if I worked harder, he would appreciate it. But the more I gave, the more they took, until he hit me, and I finally realized they never saw me as a human being. My father leaned into the camera. Sloan, listen to me. Being a good woman does not mean signing up to be a martyr. Being a supportive wife does not mean subsidizing the lives of able-bodied leeches. You have a massive brain, 2 Ivy League degrees, and a spine of steel. You do not need a man who acts like a toddler and punches like a coward. From today on, Arthur Sterling handles the bloodbath. You stay in London. You eat well, you sleep, and you dominate your career. If you need anything, call me. And if the world gets too heavy, you get on a plane and come home. The door to this house does not have a lock for you. The door to this house does not have a lock for you. That sentence melted the ice in my veins. For 5 years, I desperately tried to maintain a space I called home, but I had to beg for permission just to exist inside it. In the end, the only unconditional safe harbor I had was the arms of my parents. I wiped my eyes. I'll be fine, Dad. I swear to you, I am never looking back. Don't you dare, my mother said fiercely. A man who strikes you once has murdered the love in his heart. If you go back, he will just find new ways to break you. We talked for an hour. Before hanging up, my dad demanded the address of my Mayfair flat and my corporate security contacts and reminded me to eat a high-protein breakfast. My mother just kept repeating, sleep, honey, sleep, wake up, and conquer the world. After the call disconnected, I sat in the quiet flat. I walked to the kitchen, toasted the artisan bread, and drank a glass of cold water. It was bland, but as it hit my stomach, I felt life rushing back into my extremities. That day, my new life in London began. On my first day at the regional corporate office, I wore a slate gray tailored suit, black Louboutins, and pulled my hair into a severe twist. The bruise on my cheek had faded to a dull yellow, but it was still visible under the fluorescent lights. I didn't cake makeup over it. Some battle scars shouldn't be hidden. The person who should feel shame is the one who threw the punch. The executive boardroom on the 40th floor had panoramic views of the Thames. When I walked in, the British department heads were already seated. Some offered polite nods, others eyed me with barely concealed skepticism. An American woman, newly transferred in as regional CFO, I knew they were waiting for me to fail. Mr. Davis, the director of operations, fired the first shot. His tone was impeccably polite, but dripping with condescension. Miss Kensington, your metrics in the U.S. markets are undeniably impressive. However, the U.K. market operates on entirely different physics. Our London branch is bleeding liquidity, specifically regarding a massive medical supply contract with our primary vendor, Sterling Health. Your predecessor spent 6 months banging his head against a wall trying to fix it. What exactly is your magic bullet? I sat at the head of the table, projecting my iPad onto the massive screen. I didn't fly across the Atlantic to repeat my predecessor's failures. Mr. Davis, I need the comprehensive accounts receivable ledger, the historical payment schedules, the negotiation transcripts from the past 3 quarters, and the gross inventory data. Have them in my inbox by noon. At 3 p.m., I am meeting directly with the Sterling Health executives. Another director scoffed. You literally just landed. Perhaps you need a few weeks to study the geopolitical landscape of the deal. I locked eyes with him, my voice dropping to a glacial calm. I already audited the landscape on the flight over. The friction point of this contract isn't the base price. It's the inventory risk liability clause. If we keep slashing our margins to appease them, we bankrupt ourselves. The only mathematical solution is to restructure the payment model and legally force them to shoulder 40% of the demand forecasting risk. The boardroom went dead silent. I didn't stop. I walked them through every data point, every financial projection, every worst-case scenario. My voice wasn't loud, but it possessed lethal authority. After spending years in a house where my voice was actively suppressed, I learned the sheer weaponized power of being right. When people refuse to value your emotions, you use your competence to force them to their knees. That afternoon, the summit with the Sterling Health executives lasted 4 grueling hours. I drank 3 cups of black tea. I dismantled every aggressive counteroffer. I legally boxed out every parasitic clause. I built them a golden bridge to a new payment architecture. When the meeting concluded, the lead Sterling executive stared at me across the mahogany table. You are 6 months late, Miss Kensington, but you just saved this contract. I offered a thin smile. I'm rarely late. I was simply delayed dealing with a bad investment that needed to be liquidated. He didn't fully grasp the double meaning, but he shook my hand firmly. 3 days later, the amended contract was signed. A week later, the London branch's cash flow shifted from red to black. A month later, the global board of directors sent a formal letter of commendation to my desk. I didn't pop champagne. I just sat in my corner office, staring at the digital letter, and let out a long, heavy exhale. It turns out, when you stop expending 90% of your energy defending yourself against a parasitic husband and his greedy family, you can conquer the world. While I was methodically building my empire in London, back in Chicago, Declan and Miriam's reality was violently imploding. I didn't watch it happen, but the shockwaves reached me through Arthur Sterling, mutual acquaintances, and the psychotic emails Declan kept trying to send me from burner accounts. After their first night in the motel, Declan's meager savings evaporated. They ended up renting a miserable 200-square-foot room in a decrepit boarding house out in the deep suburbs. The drywall was rotting, and they had to share a filthy communal bathroom down the hall. Miriam, who had grown accustomed to sinking into my $5,000 crate and barrel sofa, utilizing a high-end washer-dryer, and opening a stainless steel fridge packed with Whole Foods groceries, now had to wait in line to wash her underwear in a coin-operated laundromat. Within a week, she was complaining of chronic back pain, knee joint inflammation, and crippling insomnia. Declan was completely unemployable in his field. Fired for cause, with his corporate SUV repossessed, his reputation in the logistics industry was incinerated. From a guy who wore pressed Brooks Brothers shirts and bragged at sports bars, he devolved into a desperate drifter, blasting resumes into the void. But without any hard skills, and without my father pulling strings in the background, he was rejected by every firm in the city. As for Holden and Breyer, the absolute second they confirmed I had sold the condo, frozen the accounts, and severed all financial ties, they ghosted the family. At first, Miriam called Holden in hysterics, begging him to let them sleep on his floor. Breyer snatched the phone and screamed that she was having Braxton Hicks contractions, that the stress was killing her baby, and that they couldn't fit a mouse into their apartment, let alone 2 adults. Holden coldly told his mother. Declan is the oldest son. Mom, your place is with him. It's the honor of the Vance family for him to provide for you. When there was a multi-million-dollar penthouse on the table, everyone brought knives to carve out a piece. When all that was left was a rotting boarding house room, everyone suddenly remembered the concept of boundaries. Miriam was so enraged she physically made herself sick. She screamed into the void, cursing her ungrateful youngest son. Holden just texted back, "Don't blame me. Sloane was the one funding this whole circus. She's gone. Figure it out. That text was a rusty blade twisted into Declan's gut. He used to genuinely believe he was the pillar holding up the Vance family. But when the concrete foundation named Sloane was demolished, the entire house of cards collapsed into dust. One afternoon, Arthur Sterling called my London office. His voice was a mix of dark amusement and utter exhaustion. Sloane. Opposing counsel just fired a shot across the bow. They are petitioning for a 50% split of the $1.5 million condo sale. They're arguing that because you cohabitated in the unit after the wedding, the appreciation of the asset and the proceeds constitute marital property. I was scrolling through a quarterly budget forecast. Uncle Arthur, you already know my stance. Your documentation is bulletproof. Eviscerate them. Oh, I plan to, Arthur chuckled. I just wanted to give you the heads up. Declan is alternating between sending legal threats through his bargain bin lawyer and sending you pathetic, groveling emails begging for forgiveness. I know. I've archived all of them. Do not negotiate a settlement. Absolutely not. The quieter you are, the louder they scream, and the more rope they give us to hang them with. I hung up, opened an Excel sheet, and went back to work. It was bizarre. A year ago, if Miriam just looked at me sideways, or if Declan used a harsh tone, I would lie awake until 4 a.m. having an anxiety attack. Now, they were screaming across an ocean, demanding millions, and my heart rate didn't even spike. Not because I was dead inside, but because the psychological umbilical cord had been permanently severed by the impact of his hand. On weekends, I explored London alone. I learned how to navigate the tube, shop at Marks & Spencer, and order a proper Sunday roast. I joined a boutique Pilates studio near Hyde Park. In the evenings, I bought myself fresh tulips, cooked simple, healthy meals, and listened to jazz. For the first time in 5 years, I had the bandwidth to ask myself, what do I actually want to eat tonight? What time do I want to go to sleep? Where do I want to travel this weekend? Tiny, insignificant choices. But coming from a marriage where I was treated like a highly paid indentured servant, having autonomous control over my own body was an intoxicating luxury. A month into my London deployment, I created a new, public Instagram account. I didn't block Declan or his family. I didn't hide. My first post was a cinematic shot of a flat white coffee sitting on a marble cafe table, framed by the Gothic architecture of a rainy London street. The caption was simple. Peace doesn't arrive by accident. Sometimes you have to burn down the wrong house to find the right door. My second post was a photo of me, wearing a razor-sharp Tom Ford suit, standing triumphantly in front of the global headquarters after closing the Sterling Health deal. The caption read, "A woman shouldn't fear starting over with nothing. She should only fear spending her entire life in a room where she isn't viewed as human." I knew Declan would see it. I knew his psychology flawlessly. Insecure, patriarchal men are biologically incapable of ignoring the woman they abused, especially when she thrives without them. He would make burner accounts, stalk my grid, zoom in on every pixel, desperately searching for a crack in my armor, hoping to see me depressed and broken. But what he saw wasn't a shattered victim, he saw a titan. And that visual was a psychological nuclear bomb. I kept posting. A beautiful seafood risotto I cooked. A misty morning run through Kensington Gardens. My sleek corporate desk covered in international contracts. A bouquet of white lilies I bought for myself. I wasn't flaunting. I was just existing loudly, proving that without him anchoring me to the ocean floor, I could fly. Back in Illinois, Declan stared at those photos in his moldy, unheated boarding house room. Outside, Miriam was whining about the rent being due. On the wobbly nightstand sat a styrofoam cup of cold cup noodles. On the floor lay a pile of unwashed clothes. He zoomed in on my face in front of the corporate skyscraper. I looked radiant, untouchable. He looked at his own reality. The woman who used to do his laundry, cook his meals, fund his mother's lifestyle, and silently carry the weight of his entire bloodline was now across the globe. Brokering massive deals, wearing designer suits, living a life he couldn't even afford to look at. Meanwhile, the man who used to beat his chest and demand submission was literally counting quarters to buy ramen. Declan hurled his phone against the wall. It cracked the drywall. Miriam jumped. "What is wrong with you?" He didn't answer. He dropped to his knees, picked up the phone with shaking hands, and opened the photo again. His eyes were drowning in rage, regret, blinding jealousy, and a suffocating, primal terror. He was terrified because he realized I truly didn't need him. The marital chain he thought he could use to choke me into submission had snapped, and he was the one suffocating. But men like Declan don't understand the concept of redemption through personal growth. They only know how to beg when the money gets cut off. They only feel remorse when they are forced to sleep on the floor. They label their desperation love, when in reality, it is just a parasite mourning the loss of its host. A few days later, an email from a random Proton Mail address hit my corporate inbox. I didn't even need to read the signature to know who wrote it. Sloan. I know you're in London. I am so sorry. I was wrong. My mother is having a nervous breakdown and is so remorseful. Please, come home. Or just fly me out there so I can see you one time. We were married for 5 years. You can't be this cold-blooded. I don't care about the condo. I don't care about the money. I just want you. I read it and smiled. I don't care about the money. What an absolute joke. If he didn't care about the money, why was his discount lawyer aggressively attempting to garnish the $1.5 million wire transfer through the Chicago courts? If he truly just wanted me, why did he spend 5 years completely ignoring my allergies, my stress, my fears? If he viewed me as his beloved wife, how did he manage to slap me hard enough to draw blood in front of an audience, and then sleep like a baby? I forwarded the email to Arthur Sterling without a single word of reply. That evening, I walked home from the office. The London air had a sharp, biting chill. The sidewalks were blanketed in dead leaves. I stopped at a boutique florist and bought a massive bouquet of white orchids. I brought them to my flat and arranged them in a crystal vase on the dining table. The room instantly smelled like spring. I poured myself a glass of expensive Pinot Noir and sat down. For some reason, in that exact moment, my soul felt utterly weightless. I wasn't gloating over their poverty. I felt like a Sherpa who had finally dropped an anvil off her back. The Vance family forced me to carry the crushing weight of their endless greed. Now, they were drowning under it. Declan used physical violence to force my submission. Now, he was submitting to the brutal consequences of the American legal system. Miriam demanded a daughter-in-law's ultimate sacrifice. Now, she realized that when the sacrificial lamb leaves, the vultures starve to death. I took a sip of the wine. It was dry, complex, and left a rich finish on my tongue. Much like my life now, bitter that it had to end in violence, but incredibly sweet because I survived the war. Before bed, my phone lit up with an iMessage from my mother. Did you eat a good dinner today? Your father says it's freezing in London. Make sure you wear the wool coat. We are doing great over here. Don't stress about us. Live your best life. Sloan, but promise me, don't ever be stupid again. I read that last sentence 3 times. Don't ever be stupid again. I smiled and typed back, I promise, Mom. From now on, I will only be generous to people who deserve it. And to the people who tried to destroy me. I'll start by being incredibly generous to myself. I locked the phone and turned off the lamp. For the first time in a decade, I slept a dreamless, deep, uninterrupted sleep. I had no idea that across the Atlantic, Declan was spending the entire night wide awake, plotting a move so unimaginably desperate he thought it would save him. In his warped mind, he believed it was a grand romantic gesture. In reality, it was the final act that would strip him of his last remaining molecule of human dignity. He decided to borrow money from a loan shark, buy a cheap economy ticket, and fly to London to confront me. He genuinely hallucinated that if he dropped to his knees, cried hard enough, and maybe slapped himself in the face a few times, I would instantly melt and take him back. He forgot one critical variable. The Sloan who forgave him died on the living room floor the night his hand made contact with her face. The Sloan he was flying to meet didn't believe in the tears of a man weeping over an empty wallet. And this final confrontation would be the absolute last time I ever allowed him to look at the empire he had torched. 3 weeks after I posted the photo of the white orchids, Declan actually materialized. It was a Friday. A torrential, freezing downpour had been battering London since dawn. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my corner office like silver bullets. I had just wrapped a brutal forecasting summit with the risk management team and was packing my briefcase to head down to the lobby for my chauffeured car when my desk phone buzzed. It was the front desk receptionist. Her crisp British accent was impeccably polite but strained. "Apologies for the interruption, Miss Kensington. There is an American gentleman in the lobby demanding to see you. He claims to be your husband. He does not have clearance or an appointment, and he has been loitering for quite some time." My hand, which was midway through zipping my briefcase, froze. Husband. A word that felt so foreign and repulsive, it almost made me laugh out loud. I walked to the window and looked down at the gray, chaotic streets of London. Millions of people moving with purpose. And yet, the man who used to beat his chest and declare himself the absolute monarch of my life had flown across an ocean, with no dignity and no leverage, just to grovel for a paycheck. "Is he causing a scene?" I asked. "Not currently violent, ma'am," the receptionist replied. "But he is highly agitated. Building security has flanked him." I stood in silence, analyzing my own internal biometrics. Hearing that Declan was physically in the building, was there a spike of panic? A flutter of lingering empathy? A moment of weakness? Zero. There was nothing but the clinical, Arctic calm of a debt collector holding an overdue invoice. "I will come down," I said. "Instruct security to form a perimeter, but do not physically engage unless he breaches the turnstiles." I grabbed my Burberry trench coat, locked my office, and stepped into the executive elevator. The descent felt impossibly slow. The digital floor numbers glowed in cold blue. I looked at my reflection in the brushed steel doors. Flawless hair, sharp makeup, eyes that looked like obsidian glass. The woman in the reflection was not the battered wife who stood in the center of a trashed condo touching her bleeding lip. The elevator chimed and the doors parted. The global headquarters lobby was a cavernous expanse of white marble, glass, and steel. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets, and there, standing near the leather waiting chairs, was Declan. He looked emaciated. His cheap dark suit was hopelessly wrinkled and damp from the London rain. The collar of his shirt was frayed. His sneakers were caked in mud. His hair was overgrown, his beard unkempt, and his eyes were sunken deep into his skull. He looked like a cornered stray dog. If I hadn't spent 5 years sleeping next to him, I wouldn't have recognized this broken vagrant as the arrogant man who used to lecture me on wifely obedience. The absolute second he saw me step out of the elevator, he jolted upright. A chaotic storm of emotions flashed across his face: euphoric relief, primal fear, toxic greed, and absolute desperation. "Sloane!" he croaked, his voice raw, and lunged toward me. 2 massive security guards in black suits instantly stepped into his path, raising their hands. I gave them a subtle nod to hold the line, but let him speak. Declan stopped 3 feet away from me. Maybe my aura terrified him. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I just stared at him with the sterile indifference of someone observing a stain on a museum floor. He opened his mouth, but before he could form a word, tears spilled over his lower lids. "Sloane. My God. I finally found you." I said nothing. He took a half step forward, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was so insanely wrong. I never should have laid a hand on you. I never should have let my mother dictate our lives. I shouldn't have let Holden and Breyer into the condo. It was entirely my fault. Please, please forgive me." I stared at his red, weeping eyes. A year ago, a single "I'm sorry" from Declan would have melted my defenses. I would have bought him a beer, rubbed his back, and gaslighted myself by saying, "Every marriage goes through rough patches." But today, hearing him beg sounded like white noise. Apologizing without fundamentally understanding the crime is just a manipulative tactic to regain access to the VIP lounge. "Why exactly are you here, Declan?" I asked, my voice echoing off the marble. He swallowed hard. "I came to bring you home. I want to talk this out. Sloane, I am dying without you. Since you left, my mother and I have been living in a slum. I got fired. I lost the car. I realize now that I took you for granted. Without you, I'm nothing. I understand your value now." I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "My value? Or my net worth?" He blinked, panicked. "Don't say that. I love you. I swear to God I love you." I looked at him for a long, agonizing moment, then let out a low, echoing laugh. Love. Such a profound word. It sounds like absolute sewage coming out of your mouth. Declan's face contorted in agony. "Sloane, I know you despise me. Scream at me. Hit me. I deserve it." Suddenly, he raised his right hand and violently slapped himself across the face. Smack. The sound echoed through the massive lobby. Several corporate employees walking to the turnstiles stopped dead in their tracks, staring in horror. Smack. He hit himself harder. A red welt instantly appeared on his cheek. Smack. The third blow was so violent it split his own lip. Blood pooled in the corner of his mouth. He stood there, crying and bleeding. "I'm a monster. I'm a coward. I hit you. I let my mother abuse you. I deserve to rot. Look, Sloane. Look. I'm paying you back. I hit myself. Will you please just forgive me now?" I took a physical step backward, ensuring his blood didn't splatter onto my trench coat. "Declan, stop the theatrics. This is a Fortune 500 corporate lobby, not the set of your trashy reality TV show." He froze. The security guards tensed, ready to tackle him to the marble. Stripped of the last shred of his dignity, Declan collapsed to his knees right there on the freezing stone floor. He clasped his hands together in a desperate prayer. "Sloane, I am begging you on my hands and knees. Give me one more chance. I will change. I will go to therapy. If you hate my mother, I will banish her to a nursing home. If you hate Holden and Breyer, I will block their numbers forever. I will do whatever you command. Just please. Let me be your husband again." I stared down at him. "You used to preach that your mother was the matriarch I must obey. That Holden was your blood and I had to fund him. That Breyer was carrying the Vance legacy and I had to surrender my home to her. Now that you are broke, you are willing to throw your entire bloodline into an incinerator just to get back into my bank account. Declan, if you are ruthless enough to execute your own family for cash, what guarantee do I have that you won't eventually slaughter me?" His face went rigid. "I'm not executing anyone. I just want to fix my mistake." "Fix your mistake?" I asked, my voice slicing through the air. "Fix it by trying to move back into a penthouse I already sold? Fix it by having your discount lawyer aggressively petition the Chicago courts for half my cash? Fix it by sending me psychotic emails while your mother launches a smear campaign against me on Facebook? Is that your version of fixing a mistake?" Declan dropped his head. His lips trembled. That was my mom's idea. She said if I didn't sue for the money, I'd be homeless forever. I was terrified, so I listened to her. But I don't want to sue you. I just wanted to look you in the eyes. I let out a soft, exhausted sigh. It is always my mom's idea. For 5 years. Every word out of your mouth hid behind your mother's skirt. When you drained my accounts, it was your mom's idea. When you moved squatters in, it was your mom's idea. When you struck me across the face, I'm sure that was your mom's idea too. Declan, you are 32 years old. When are you going to stop acting like an infant and admit that you are just a cowardly parasite? That sentence acted like a defibrillator. He snapped his head up, and for a microsecond, his eyes flashed with that familiar, violent rage. The exact same rage that precipitated the slap. But the fire was instantly smothered by absolute terror. He was in a foreign country, surrounded by my security, stripped of his mother's backup, and devoid of the home turf advantage. He was naked and defenseless. Seeing that micro-expression of rage, my heart went completely numb. "You claim you love me," I said, my voice eerily calm. "All right, I will give you one final opportunity to prove it." Declan's eyes widened with manic hope. "Anything. I swear to God, Sloane, ask me anything. We were married for 5 years. I know your soul." I stared down at him and slowly raised one index finger. Question 1. What specific food am I so violently allergic to that if I even inhale the airborne proteins for too long, my throat closes, I break out in severe hives, and require an EpiPen? Declan's mouth fell open. He blinked stupidly. Sweat began beading on his forehead despite the drafty lobby. Allergy. An allergy. Shellfish? No. Wait, scallops? You always said shrimp made your mouth itchy. I shook my head slowly. Incorrect, he scrambled. Gluten, peanuts. I stared at him, pronouncing every syllable. Scallops are an intolerance. My anaphylactic trigger is truffles. Fungi. Declan froze. I continued. Your mother loves truffle oil. Holden loves it too. Every time your mother visited, she would buy cheap, heavily artificially scented truffle fries and leave them in the living room. I told you 100 times I couldn't breathe, that my throat was swelling closed. Your mother called me a dramatic snob, and you told me, it's just fancy fries, Sloane. Open a damn window. Once, I had to lock myself in the bathroom with an inhaler for an hour. You were on the couch playing Xbox. You didn't even notice I was gone. Declan's lips quivered. I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I raised a second finger. Question 2. Whenever I suffer a severe gastritis attack from working 80-hour weeks, what specific medication is permanently kept in my purse? He opened his mouth, then snapped it shut. His eyes darted wildly, frantically digging through his memory banks. But in 5 years of marriage, had he ever once looked inside my medicine bag? He only knew how to ask. Where's the credit card? Where's my dinner? Why is my mom crying? He stammered. Pills. Little white pills. Advil? No. Wait. You took those pink capsules for cramps. I let out a cynical scoff. Incorrect. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a blister pack, and dropped it on the marble floor in front of his knees. Omeprazole. Prilosec. A high-dose proton pump inhibitor. I have practically lived on these for years. Every night I came home from the office, I dry swallowed one. One night, the stomach ulcer flared up so violently, I was curled in a fetal position on the rug. You stepped right over my body to grab the TV remote. The only thing you said to me was, "Hey, don't forget to wire Mom her allowance tomorrow." And then you went to bed. Declan's face turned the color of ash. He stared at the blister pack on the floor, his shoulders violently shaking. Sloane, I was blind. I was a selfish idiot. But I see it now. I will take care of you. I didn't let him finish. I raised a third finger. Question 3. I locked eyes with him, drilling into his soul. The night my mother was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital for a hypertensive stroke, I called your cell phone 14 times. You sent every single call to voicemail. Where were you that night? Declan looked up, his eyes glassy and vacant. He vaguely remembered the incident, but he was utterly terrified to speak the truth. I refreshed his memory. You were at a sports bar in Wrigleyville with your frat buddies. You claimed it was a boys' night. You texted me to stop acting like a psycho stalker because my calls were embarrassing you in front of your friends. My mother was in the ICU. I signed her admittance papers alone. I paid the $10,000 emergency deductible alone. I sat in the freezing hospital corridor until 6:00 a.m., completely alone. You waltzed into the condo at noon the next day, hungover, and had the unmitigated audacity to throw a tantrum because I hadn't brewed your coffee. Declan's jaw hung slack, but his vocal cords failed him. I looked down at the pathetic creature kneeling at my feet. You scream that you love me, yet you have no idea what could kill me. You have no idea what medication keeps me functioning. You don't even remember where you were when my mother almost died. The only things you remember with absolute photographic clarity are my W-2, the square footage of my penthouse, and the routing number where I sent your family's extortion money. Tears dripped off Declan's chin and splattered on the marble, but they triggered absolutely zero empathy in my chest. Tears that arrive this late aren't a sign of a broken heart. They are just the byproduct of a broken ATM. He crawled forward, trying to grab the hem of my trench coat. Sloane, I was a demon. You are right about everything. But we stood at an altar. We swore an oath. How can you be this ruthless? I flew across the world to surrender to you. I have literally nothing left. If you throw me away, I am going to die. I stepped back, out of his reach. Do not try to hold me hostage with threats of self-destruction. How you survive your own life is your administrative problem. I was not put on this earth to be a human flotation device for a man who drilled holes in his own boat. He looked up, and the desperation began to curdle into toxic resentment. You changed. You used to be warm. You used to love me so much. Now you're just a cold-blooded corporate machine. I nodded slowly. You're right. I did love you. And you weaponized that love to feed the gluttony of your bloodline. You weaponized my grace to force my submission. You weaponized the sanctity of marriage to camouflage your parasitic, abusive nature. Declan, I didn't change. I just woke up. Outside, the London storm raged harder. The rain battered the glass facade. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and dropped it onto a sleek side table. Inside are hard copies from Arthur Sterling. The contested divorce is fully filed with the Cook County courts. The evidence of your physical assault is logged. The financial audit proving the condo was a non-marital asset is finalized. Your motion to extort the cash sale will be thrown out by the judge. If you attempt to stalk or harass me in the United Kingdom again, I will have the Metropolitan Police arrest you, and I will forward the restraining order to Interpol. Declan stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. I didn't fly here to get served divorce papers. I flew here to bring my wife home, and I didn't come down to the lobby to reconcile, I replied, my voice echoing like a steel blade. I came down to inform you that, as of this minute, the only relationship that exists between us is dictated by the penal code. He trembled violently. Sloane. I turned to the British security guards and spoke in sharp, concise directives. Escort this unauthorized individual out of the building. If he resists, call the authorities. The two massive guards stepped forward, grabbing Declan firmly by the biceps, hauling him to his feet. He thrashed weakly, but he was physically depleted and lacked the courage to actually fight back. As they dragged him toward the revolving doors, he kept twisting his neck, screaming my name over the ambient noise of the lobby. Sloane! Sloane, I was wrong. I swear to God I was wrong. Don't do this. I stood completely still. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I wanted to witness the man who once inflicted immeasurable psychological and physical trauma upon me being thrown out of my empire like a bag of garbage. Not out of sadistic joy, but to permanently brand into my brain the reality that whatever tries to destroy you eventually becomes utterly insignificant. The glass doors slid open, and the guards shoved Declan out into the freezing rain, his cheap suit instantly soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. He pressed his hands against the thick glass, his mouth moving frantically as he screamed my name into the storm. I turned on my heel and walked back to the executive elevator. Every step was deliberate, measured, and unbothered. Behind me, the receptionist bowed her head, apologizing profusely for the breach in security. I told her it was entirely fine. I stepped into the elevator and swiped my keycard. As the steel doors closed, shutting out the lobby, I looked at my reflection one last time. I was still Sloane, but I was no longer the Sloane who flinched at a raised voice. I was no longer the Sloane who viewed divorce as a failure. I was no longer the Sloane who believed women had to bleed themselves dry to keep the peace. I took a deep breath. On the 40th floor, an international logistics contract was waiting for my signature. Millions of dollars needed to be allocated. My empire was waiting. It wasn't going to pause just because a ghost was crying in the rain. I worked late into the evening. When I finally left the skyscraper, the storm had broken. The slick London pavement mirrored the glowing street lamps, looking like an oil painting. I didn't summon my driver. I walked toward the underground station. The frigid wind bit at my neck, but I felt invincible. My phone buzzed. A text from Arthur Sterling. Opposing counsel just requested a final mediation session. They are still aggressively gunning for half the real estate cash. I accepted the meeting. Don't stress. Their legal standing is a joke. Just a warning they might try to launch a smear campaign to pressure you into a settlement. I read it and texted back. Understood. Proceed with the legal guillotine. I am not afraid. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I knew Declan wouldn't accept defeat gracefully, and Miriam certainly wouldn't. Greedy people never blame their own gluttony when they lose their prize. They attack. They defame. They cry to relatives. They invent wild conspiracies that I was sleeping with a British executive, that I embezzled funds, that I sold the family home to run off with a secret lover. But I was no longer the fragile girl who cried in the bathroom over gossip. I had ironclad documentation, surveillance footage, a shark of an attorney, a high-powered career, parents who had my back, and above all, I finally had my own respect. That night, an unhinged, rambling email from Declan bypassed my spam filter. He wrote a 2,000-word manifesto about how he had stood in the freezing rain for 2 hours, how he couldn't afford a hotel and had to sleep in a hostel near King's Cross, and how his mother back in Chicago had collapsed from a panic attack when he told her I rejected him. He claimed he was so broken he wanted to step into traffic. I skimmed it, forwarded it to Arthur's paralegal, and deleted it. I had finally learned the most vital lesson of adulthood. Other people's manufactured misery is not my jurisdiction, especially when that misery is the exact fruit of the poisonous tree they planted themselves. The next morning, Declan dragged himself to Heathrow and flew back to Chicago. He didn't see me again. He didn't extract a single dollar. He didn't secure any promises. He brought absolutely zero hope back to his mother. The only thing he carried across the Atlantic was the manila envelope of divorce papers and the memory of 3 questions he could never answer. 3 questions that didn't attack his bank account, but brutally assassinated his ego. He never loved his wife. He only loved the luxury concierge service his wife provided. And when the service was terminated, he suffered a psychotic break and called it romance. Meanwhile, I woke up at 6 a.m. I brewed a cup of Earl Grey, ate a hard-boiled egg with toast, strapped on my armor, and took the tube to the financial district. Before leaving the flat, I looked in the hallway mirror and smiled. The final legal war was looming on the horizon. But inside my chest, the true war had already been won. I had utterly annihilated my own weakness. Declan landed at O'Hare under a gloomy, oppressive Chicago sky. He dragged his wet, ruined bag through the arrivals terminal, his posture hunched as if his spine had been surgically removed. The few days in London had evaporated the high-interest payday loan he took out to buy the ticket. The hostel, the cold food, the hours shivering outside my corporate fortress, it had systematically stripped away his final illusions of power. But men like Declan are fundamentally incapable of self-reflection. During the Uber ride back to the squalid suburban boarding house, his crushing humiliation rapidly fermented into a venomous, blistering rage. He didn't think about his hand connecting with my jaw. He didn't think about his mother occupying my home. He only thought that it was my fault he was broke, my fault he was unemployed, and my fault he was a laughingstock. When he unlocked the door to the claustrophobic room, Miriam was sitting on a folding chair, clutching a pillow, her eyes swollen shut. The moment she saw her son, she shot up. "Declan! Did she come to her senses? Did she write us a check?" Declan hurled his duffel bag against the peeling wallpaper. His face was a mask of pure hatred. "She wouldn't even let me upstairs. She sent her corporate goons to throw me into the street." Miriam gasped, clutching her pearls. Dear God, how dare she treat her own husband like a stray dog? What an ungrateful, psychotic bitch. You flew to another continent, begged on your knees, and she treats you like trash? Declan collapsed onto the squeaky mattress, burying his face in his hands. "Mom, just shut up." But Miriam was incapable of shutting up. The agonizing loss of the $2 million penthouse had mutated her into a feral animal. "We are not letting her get away with this. She sold that condo for $1.5 million in cash, and now she's living like a queen in Europe while we rot in this hellhole. That money is marital property. We need at least half of it." Declan looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "My lawyer said, Arthur Sterling has airtight proof the condo was bought by her parents in a trust before the wedding." Miriam slapped the flimsy bedside table. "And you believe a blood-sucking lawyer? I don't know the law, but I know common decency. You were married for 5 years. You lived there. You put sweat equity into that marriage. How the hell do you walk away with zero? Furthermore, selling a house in 24 hours? She's hiding something. We need to scorch her reputation. I want every aunt, uncle, cousin, and former coworker to know she's a cheating, thieving whore who abandoned her family for a British sugar daddy." I knew Miriam would choose the nuclear option. People who lack the legal ammunition to win in a courtroom always resort to throwing feces in the court of public opinion. They operate under the delusion that if they drag a successful woman's name through enough mud, she will panic, protect her corporate image, and write a hush-money check. But Miriam was playing chess against a ghost. The Sloane who cared about neighborhood gossip was dead. The new Sloane had survived a physical assault, a multi-million-dollar real estate purge, and the total annihilation of her reality. I no longer governed my life based on the opinions of peasants. 3 days later, the digital smear campaign launched. In the massive Vance Extended Family Facebook group, Miriam posted a 1,000-word, tear-soaked manifesto. She claimed I was having a torrid affair with a British executive, that I had secretly liquidated the family estate to fund my illicit lifestyle, and that I had abandoned my devoted, heartbroken husband. She painted a horrific picture of Briar, heavily pregnant, being violently thrown into the freezing rain by a psychotic, rich sister-in-law. Holden, prodded by his mother, jumped into the fray. He posted cryptic Instagram stories about how money can't buy class, and how rich elites exploit working-class families. Briar was more calculating. She posted black and white photos of her swollen belly with tragic captions about how a mother just wants a safe nursery. But corporate greed ruins families. Naturally, none of them mentioned the hostile takeover of my property. None of them mentioned Declan's physical violence. None of them mentioned the fake $950,000 debt that caused them to scatter like cockroaches. Evil people are phenomenally talented at editing the footage of their own crimes. Arthur Sterling's paralegal aggregated screenshots of every single post and emailed them to me in London. I was sitting in my corner office, reviewing a Q3 performance matrix, when I opened the PDF. I read every lie, every melodramatic comment, from distant aunts calling me a monster. I didn't sweat. I simply replied to Arthur. Uncle Arthur. Compile the URLs. Once the defamation threshold is met, unleash the cease and desist letters. Threaten punitive damages for libel. Arthur replied within minutes. Already drafted. Focus on your empire, kiddo. Let the dogs bark. The caravan moves on. I locked my phone and went back to my spreadsheets. A year ago, this would have sent me into an emotional tailspin. I would have been terrified of my parents seeing it. Terrified of my colleagues judging me. Now, I understood a fundamental law of physics. My integrity was not vulnerable to the saliva of parasites. My honor was forged in the absolute brutality of the truth. A week later, the mandated divorce mediation took place. I didn't fly back to Chicago. Per Arthur's strategy, I attended via a secure Zoom link from my London office. On my laptop screen, the sterile conference room of the Cook County Courthouse appeared. Declan sat next to his bargain bin lawyer. Miriam was hovering in the background as an interested party. While not legally required, her narcissistic ego wouldn't let her miss a chance to play the crucified matriarch. The second my feed connected, Miriam leaned into the camera and started weeping loudly. Sloane! I just want to ask you to your face, how could you be so demonic? You sold the house, you threw your husband away, you forced an old woman to live in a slum. You showed zero mercy to a pregnant woman. Do you have no soul? I stared at her through the high-definition webcam. Her face was haggard, but her eyes were still identical. Feral, calculating, and fully weaponized. Before I could unmute my microphone, Arthur Sterling cut her off with lethal precision. Mrs. Vance, I strongly advise you to contain your outbursts to relevant legal matters. Moral grandstanding holds zero evidentiary weight. If you continue to defame my client on this recorded line, I will add it to the pending libel suit. Miriam snapped her mouth shut, muttering, I'm just speaking God's truth. Arthur opened a massive binder. Let's speak legal truth. Exhibit A. The warranty deed and the premarital trust documents proving the River North property was 100% separate property purchased by Miss Kensington's parents. Exhibit B. The closing disclosures showing the asset was unencumbered at the time of sale. Under Illinois law, the proceeds are exclusively non-marital. Declan's lawyer adjusted his tie, looking stressed. Mr. Sterling, while we acknowledge the origin of the asset, my client cohabitated in the unit for 5 years and contributed to the maintenance of the marital household. We argue that his sweat equity entitles him to a percentage of the appreciation. Arthur actually laughed. Sweat equity? Let's examine that. Exhibit C. Comprehensive bank statements proving Miss Kensington unilaterally paid the HOA fees, property taxes, utilities, and maintenance. Furthermore, Exhibit D. Wire transfer receipts proving my client continuously subsidized the Vance family, including bailing out Mr. Vance's brother, Holden, and paying Mrs. Vance a monthly allowance. Exhibit E, the corporate vehicle, Mr. Vance operated was solely in my client's name. If we are discussing financial contributions, Mr. Vance operated at a massive deficit. Declan stared at the mahogany table, his fists clenched, utterly humiliated. Miriam couldn't control herself. She is a millionaire. It is her duty to pay for things. A wife is supposed to serve her husband's family. I unmuted my microphone. For the first time, my voice echoed into the Chicago courtroom. Serving a family is vastly different than being extorted by a cartel. Miriam gasped. I continued. My tone absolute zero. For 5 years, I funded your lifestyle. I paid Holden's debts. I bought your groceries. I never threw it in your face, because I falsely believed we were family. But a family doesn't invade a home, ransack an office, and demand a free luxury maternity ward without asking permission. Behind Miriam, Breyer, who had dragged herself to the hearing, looked down at her lap in shame. I locked eyes with Declan through the camera. And a family certainly doesn't backhand his wife across the face in front of an audience, and then demand she apologize. The mediation room fell into a horrifying silence. Arthur Sterling didn't miss a beat. He tapped his keyboard and shared his screen. The 4K security footage from the living room began to play. The video showed Miriam barking orders. Holden raiding the wine fridge. Me standing alone, refusing to yield. Declan storming in, screaming, and then the explosive, violent slap that knocked me into the wall. Smack. The audio cracked through the courthouse speakers. Even though I had lived it, seeing it play out clinically on a screen made my adrenaline spike. But I wasn't afraid. I felt utterly invincible. Declan closed his eyes, physically shrinking in his chair. Miriam's jaw hit the floor. Declan's lawyer rubbed his forehead, realizing his case was a radioactive dumpster fire. Arthur killed the video. We formally request the mediator note the undeniable presence of domestic battery. My client vehemently rejects any settlement claims regarding the real estate proceeds. Furthermore, regarding the coordinated cyber defamation campaign, we have logged every IP address and screenshot. If the Vance family does not immediately issue a public retraction and execute a permanent non-disparagement NDA, we will pursue catastrophic civil damages. Declan looked up at the webcam, his eyes shattered. Sloan. I know I crossed the line. But do you have to execute me like this? I just need a fraction of the money so I can start my life over. I stared at him. Start over? With my money? His face flushed dark red. I was your husband for 5 years. You held the title of husband for 5 years, I corrected. You never performed the duties for a single day. You lived in my house, drove my car, spent my paycheck, and allowed your bloodline to treat me like a dog. When I finally stood up, you assaulted me. Declan, you aren't mourning the loss of your wife. You are mourning the loss of your trust fund. He dropped his head into his hands. The mediation was a bloodbath. When it concluded, Miriam still tried to rally her troops, whining to her lawyer in the hallway. But the threat of the defamation lawsuit had completely broken their ranks. Within 48 hours, Arthur's cease and desist letters hit their mailboxes via certified mail. Terrified of being sued into bankruptcy, the Vance family folded. Holden deactivated his Instagram. Breyer deleted her tragic pregnancy posts. And Miriam, the arrogant, loud-mouthed matriarch who ruled her small town through gossip, was legally forced to post a humiliating, lawyer-drafted public apology on Facebook, admitting her previous statements were entirely fabricated and that she deeply regretted her malicious lies. When the apology went live, Miriam allegedly threw up from the sheer humiliation. Her entire social circle realized she was a fraud. The woman who tried to drown me in rumors was ultimately suffocated by her own tongue. Declan didn't fight back anymore. The footage of the assault destroyed any leverage he had. The final divorce hearing took place in a freezing Chicago winter. Per Arthur's request, I flew back to the States one last time to physically sign the decrees and look the judge in the eye. My parents drove me to the Daily Center. My mother held my hand the entire walk to the courtroom, her grip warm and shaking slightly. My father walked on my right, his posture rigid, daring anyone to look at me wrong. When we walked into the corridor, Declan and Miriam were sitting on a wooden bench. Declan had lost 20 pounds. His suit hung off him like a scarecrow. Miriam wore all black, her hair entirely graying. The second she saw my father's icy glare, she looked at the floor. The arrogance was dead and buried. I didn't avoid Declan's gaze. I walked right past him, the click of my Louboutins echoing off the marble. The hearing was brutally efficient. There were no screaming matches, no theatrical tears. In a courtroom, narcissistic manipulation dies the second it hits the sterilizing light of empirical evidence. Declan's lawyer made one final, pathetic plea for spousal support, which Arthur Sterling decimated with the financial audit and the domestic violence exhibit. The judge looked down from the bench. "Mr. Vance, do you admit to committing domestic battery against the petitioner?" Declan stared at his shoes for a long time. "I admit I lost control that night." The judge frowned. "Do you concede that the River North property was funded entirely by the petitioner's family trust prior to the marriage?" "I concede," Declan rasped. Sitting in the gallery, Miriam began to quietly weep. But this time, nobody in the courtroom felt a shred of pity for her. Her tears were just the hollow sound of a parasite realizing the host had died. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. I didn't give a dramatic monologue. I looked directly at the judge and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, I spent 5 years attempting to salvage this union. I believed that my infinite patience would buy peace, but my patience was exploited as a weakness. My private assets were treated as communal slush funds. My career was treated as an obligation, and ultimately, my physical safety was violated because I refused to surrender my property to his mother. I respectfully request the court grant the dissolution of marriage, protect my sole assets, and issue a permanent protective order so I never have to look over my shoulder again." I sat down. Under the heavy oak table, my mother squeezed my hand. My father stared straight ahead, but I saw a single tear trace down his weathered cheek. The ruling was absolute. The divorce was granted. The $1.5 million from the condo sale was legally cemented as my exclusive, non-marital property. Declan was denied all spousal support due to the recorded assault. He was ordered to pay civil damages for emotional distress and subjected to a strict restraining order. When the gavel banged, it was over. Declan had absolutely nothing. No house to return to, no wife to manipulate, no money to divide, no unearned status to flaunt. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright, chaotic hallway. Miriam was leaning against a pillar, struggling to breathe. Declan trailed a few steps behind me. "Sloane," he called out. His voice was hollow. I stopped, but I didn't turn around immediately. "I'm sorry," he whispered. There was no theatrical begging this time. Just the exhausted realization of total defeat. I turned and looked at the man who had stolen half a decade of my life. "I accept your apology, Declan, but I will never forgive you for the years you stole from me. Survive your life, if you can." His lips trembled. "Will you be happy?" I looked at him with eyes as cold as the Chicago winter. "That is absolutely none of your business." I turned my back and walked away. At the end of the corridor, my parents were waiting. My mother opened her arms, and I stepped into her embrace. This time, I didn't sob. Just a single, quiet tear rolled down my cheek, like the final raindrop falling from a leaf after a horrific hurricane. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the freezing Chicago sky had suddenly cracked open, revealing a blinding, brilliant winter sun. I looked up at the skyscrapers. This city once held my penthouse, my abusive marriage, my silent panic attacks, and my invisible wounds. But today, it didn't feel heavy anymore. Sometimes, a city isn't toxic. We just anchored ourselves to the wrong human within it. A few days later, I flew back to London. The corporate machine kept turning. Mergers, acquisitions, quarterly reports. My calendar was packed, but my chest was light. There was no longer a rotting umbilical cord tying me to a living room filled with peanut shells and the smell of cheap roast beef. Through the grapevine, I heard that Declan eventually secured a warehouse job making a fraction of his old salary. He and Miriam were still stuck in that depressing boarding house. Holden and Breyer had the baby, but without me subsidizing their lives, their credit cards maxed out and bill collectors started circling. Miriam, who had hallucinated that her first grandson would be the key to stealing my penthouse, was now forced to babysit in a cramped, moldy studio apartment screaming at her other daughter-in-law over the price of diapers. I heard the rumors, and I instantly deleted them from my brain. I didn't need their suffering to validate my happiness. My freedom wasn't built on their destruction. It was built on my own resurrection. One Sunday afternoon, I was walking through Hyde Park. The autumn leaves were a brilliant, burning gold. I held a cup of Earl Grey tea, sitting on a wrought iron bench, watching tourists and dogs run across the grass. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Your dad and I just saw the picture you posted. Our daughter's smile is so beautiful. Keep smiling exactly like that. We love you." I opened the Instagram app. It was a photo of me standing on a stone bridge over the Serpentine Lake, wearing a camel-colored trench coat, the London wind blowing my hair. My smile wasn't a massive, toothy grin. It was a quiet, grounded smile. The smile of a woman who had walked through the fires of hell and refused to let the flames turn her into a monster. I typed back, "I will keep smiling. Don't worry about me, Mom and Dad." I locked the phone and tilted my head up toward the pale British sun. I still believe in human kindness, but from now on, my kindness has heavily fortified borders. I still believe in partnership, but I understand that a marriage license is not a suicide pact for my assets. I still have an infinite capacity to love, but before I ever pour that love into another human being, I will fiercely, ruthlessly love myself first. And I will never, ever, let another hand strike my face again.